And I'm live. All right. So what do we got here today? We have the study on antipsychotics. So basically, I'm listening to "On Top of the World" by Imagine Dragons. Like, what would spit off this reason of friendliness between me doing a live and then looking up the analytical foresight of antipsychotics. So I was like, oh, might as well do a live about antipsychotics. So here I go. So basically, it got into my mind of doing the live to do the antipsychotic story here. So let's go. The slow mode is obviously turned on 2x2, just so it doesn't get jammed. Obviously, right? So let's go into the next song here. Sharing my screen, obviously. Oh, another crazy song came up. So that's just the module I'm on right now. But basically, I'm looking up the role of a typical antipsychotic. So if you don't know what a typical antipsychotic, let's look it up right here. A typical. I think I have it written down. Typical antipsychotic. I mean, you might not know the words. For me, it's stuck in my horizons my whole life, basically. It's in whole life for me, whether you like it or not. If you're unaware, I do have a rare blood type as well, so it's not generally seen as always taking medication, but it is helpful to take medication because of the health. You might not get blood the same way as somebody else. So generally speaking, even though there's not really paperwork you can find, it's the general rule is to look in like population pool samples to look into why you would give something, not give something else. So here we go. And I still haven't fixed my problem with my video if I've shown you this before. So basically, here's what an antipsychotic is. So let's listen to the answer here. And it's different in democracy. And again, I'm not a medical animal, but honestly, you know, so if you need to read this, I mean, you can read. I'm going to stop you right there because, honestly, I don't want to give you like the idea that I'm, giving you the idea of doing something. But let's look at the side effects here of just what general antipsychotics can do. So, typical antipsychotics can cause, and if you're wondering if this little root here can play the sound bit, it cannot really do that. So, oh, can it? Or okay, so I mean, those are the properties, and apparently this just was paused. So, basically, with antipsychotics, they can treat conditions like such as schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, something like bipolar, different conditions based on like various issues with someone. So, it's the same like for, you're psychotic one day. I mean, you might be able to say if it's like a past issue that's repetitive, and this is like more of a social like interaction kind of way, right? You might say this is kind of psychotic in a way. It's a break of the moral character of a narrative, right? Like which is on the stage, the idea or theory about beyond the narrative of now and this kind of firm reality of like the benefit of now, like common day kind of thing, what any normal person would do, rational person would do with given evidence, right? We don't say evidence in English, we say evidence, causality, it's the foresight forehand of a general issue, right? So that's based on democracy and liberty, right? Okay, so let's go on here. So the reality of a antipsychotic is What is an antipsychotic? So antipsychotic basically blocks the dopamine in the brain. It blocks, also, which is in some medications, it blocks the serotonin receptors in the brain. Kind of like what the opposite of what something like an antitriptylic, or sorry, cyclical antidepressant is. And if you don't know what a cyclic antidepressant is, they are used in medicine today. They're kind of like, medications to help treat depression, basically. But that's not what this, video is about. This video is basically about, video about treating the general anxiety. And what is, the general anxiety? Doctors, many agree. There's been studies. They say like dopamine, the thing that helps release adrenaline, different endorphins in the chemical blood structure into your body, also that serotonin like receptor, right? It gets activated by these chemicals in your body. So basically, they say dopamine is like the biggest factor in that, right? That, like out of all the counting, maybe adenosine, elements in the body and what reacts with like phosphates and things like that in your blood and body, right? They'd probably say dopamine is the most significant factor. So they use dopamine as an example of, well, the condition needs rationalization. So let's say like somebody's using drugs, or let's say they're using coffee. Basically, let's go with the legal idea of dopamine, right? So let's say dopamine has nicotinic receptors in it, and it has a way to pump your blood, your glutathione in your body, and it helps build that dopamine, right? It doesn't connect the dots technically. It goes to your blood vessels. Your blood vessels are like full of ions and charges in a way. They're ventricular, so they're kind of like organ. They close and collapse. They're cells based on membrane. So basically, what I'm getting at is the caffeine will start to exaggerate that effect. It's a stimulant, and it will basically create dopamine receptor, agonist chemical feeling in your brain. So I got that right here. It's like a static echo in the air. So basically, the dopamine in your brain is going to create a sensation that is euphoric in a way. That euphoria is usually exaggerated by serotonin and dopamine collectively, going and interacting in a way, creating like axion and then synapse receptors, like going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and building kind of like chambers, like in a metal like pole that are ringing back and forth, or one of those chulls that go whoop, whoop, like a psychiatrist might have you tap one ball, goes back. Right. So, I mean, there isn't a right or wrong for that story of dopamine, serotonin receptors. I mean, we can kind of level it out, or anyone can really level the idea out. But the general principle is that you stay away from too much of something. So, as they say, a cup of coffee can lead from like maybe 40 milligrams, like decaffeinated. Technically, probably 60 to 70, maybe. It just depends on what you might consider caffeine. It's really in the air, right? If something with removed caffeine, is it caffeine still organic caffeine, the same as caffeine? It's up in there. It's not exact science, right? But you look at caffeine that's manufactured and synthesized in a lab, that's technically considered a caffeine residual. So of like a bigger structure, a chain, but caffeine for that, like it's a phosphate, which means it's not really supposed to be edible. It's like an organic compound that's used like as a like biosynthesis for like a pesticide. They do it as a preservative in soda, right? So they add it to the soda, this preservative. Why? Why? So I mean, if you look at like non-caffeinated soda, is there a reason why it tastes so bad? Well, not really. I mean, it basically tastes the same. They just don't make it well. The pesticides are, it's within their business development. So it's about a bunch of factors in the food somewhat as well. So and their infrastructure of the business. So take the caffeine, and it's also dark in my room. It's not like really light; it's dark, so I'm just kind of it's a bright screen. So basically, what you get from caffeine is a dopamine sensation in your blood and body, and fills up the volume of blood, and then basically it can cause that reaction of the adenosine reactor receptors like activating your brain, and then causing a stimulating effect. It might cause pupils in your eyes. It might make your skin tighter in a way, or it might, make you tingly, or it might make you sweaty. So those are just things to think about. Same thing is for other dopamine, related products, GABA is technically, kind of related to dopamine in a way, although it's just a precursor to kind of get that adrenaline in your body flowing, and it goes through your CNS or CVS, like your CNS, your heart, your blood, your vessels in your body, and then it kind of becomes a central nervous system stimulant, and then it activates that dopamine receptor, right? So it's like breathing air and oxygen turning into CO2, but alcohol is worse because it's more dangerous. But I'm not really going to get into that. But I would say alcohol is probably one of the most dangerous things because it, of course, soluble in water. So that's another thing. So if you take water, put it, or put alcohol reactory, or wipe a bottle with water, it might have precipitate, or might react with the bottle and it'll cause it to crackle, right? So same thing for skin. It's soluble. The cellulose on your body wall of your skin. I mean, it's not exactly tactical. So I mean, basically, in the medical world, you imprint something twice so that it has a reactory gain, so you can see what you're observing, basically, in some senses. But going on, I mean, there's other dopamine related products, or cigarettes that release dopamine, adrenatics receptors, and then there's also different phosphate chains that release dopamine. So that's like drugs like opioids, stimulants, that create and react to dopamine in a different way. So and they're like, can I get a dopamine reaction from drinking water? And like, you can actually get a dopamine reaction from drinking water, as it is like a pure emotion, right? So, I mean, like the water has tangular phosphates, things like that. Technically, like the lowest scale, but it's like more of a adrenal function. So it probably has to do with your blood, connecting tissue in a way. So I'm going over the antipsychotics now. So the repertoires of this conversation is what is a binding class versus what is a receptor acting, active receptor. So basically, let's go into these antipsychotics. So I have a few picked out and lined up here that I wanted to take a look at. So basically, I have ziprasidone. Oh, I'm sorry, ziprasidone overdose, or I'm sorry, ziprasidone medication. I picked this one straight out of the hat, and I was like, well, seems like an outlier. It's not really given out anymore as a medication. You know, and it basically has the potential possibly to be, like antiheptic in a way. So, and that's just the theory at least. So that's what I'm, trying the conclusion on. So let's say you have this drug and like all the other drugs, they react differently to different organs in your body, right? Or subsets. Maybe like some trials been done and, they say like one is effective to the liver, another is effective to the kidney, another might be affected more to the kidney, or another kidney, and the one is maybe in your esophagus, or something else, right? But then they said this one is related to your haptic uretary system, right? So the thing that pumps the blood from your out of your body, and it's also related to intramuscular, so it's causing the bad reaction. So it can actually create a internal way to process maybe phosphates, things that are too strong in your body, and then you pump them out of your body through urine, or through technically CO2, but it would mostly be through urine, or somewhat your bowel. So I mean, the theoretical compost of this infrastructure is, does Zypreson have the quality to pump more things out through maybe vertices, like in your organs, or like how does it work? So like the theory is maybe it's painless, it causes less pain in users, to relieve the pain of the abstract illness here, which is like too much phosphate in the blood, or something like alcohol bound, or something that is like GABA related, right? You wouldn't necessarily say GABA since, but there's a GABA related. So it's kind of like those things like are like binding, or like pushing on some sort of other issue here, like kind of like your organs, or your reactory, your glands that regulate your organs, right? Or your chest, your CNS issue, or your air in your lungs. So we go over these as Eprazone, studies here. So basically, as Eprazone, and it's relatively a higher dose than any of the other medications there. And then you have other ones. So this is a cases of overdose toxicity. This was related to higher or significantly higher doses. This was Spain, and this was in where was it? Spain, and then I read it earlier. Spain, and then I guess Spain, maybe. So basically, with this study, it was saying that there was actually pyramidal side effects and ecological effects, and if you don't know, anticlockral effects, and extrapyramidal symptoms or binding effects of the issues with the drug, like agitation, remnants of, like shaking, things like that. But also that does have to do with possible poisoning too. So it's always have something you need to take into account. So the anticholinergic, or I'm sorry, anticholinergic effects are adverse reactions to medication that block the parasympathetic nervous system. These effects can include dry mouth, constipation, and confusion. So, I mean, if you're sticking with me, 040 on my computer here, which is 040, like zero views. So basically, the reaction here is what you can see here. So I mean, it's dry mouth, constipation, confusion. So kind of like a mental state you're in. What is the reaction there? I mean, it's probably not exact science either, but it probably has to do with maybe your, like, what you've been eating that day. And I mean, I'm sure a normal person, even not on medication, would say, like, I could probably get almost like a caloric effect even from drinking something with vitamin C in it. I mean, it's normal behavior. Agitation, heartache, let's say less of it, right? But blurry vision, just normal things, kind of like almost um, felt sick or something for the first time, and almost like had a new water supply, or you had something else. So, um, these are all effects of like anticholinergic, or I'm sorry, and I probably just saying it, but anti-cholinergic. I'm sorry, effects. So basically, they might differ for each one of these, but they might be somewhat similar because they do similar things to the brain. And again, I'm just studying psychology, basically. So basically, we have these overdose cases here, and basically they're given a large amount of dose. It doesn't really say much. It says hypnotics were used, basically, and it may have led to their death, basically. So basically, you have that study there. It's unfortunate. That's a large amount. So I mean, let's see, that's high, like 1,000, um, 4,000. That's higher than even the FDA rates or regular dose of that. So um, that's that's crazy here. I mean, that's a very large or strong dose for anyone. So basically, the realistic tendency is like, is this medication also used as something else in a study? So I mean, you can go on. So like, let's see. Let's see what other studies it has, and I can show up a little bit about the medication here itself. As Azoprazone is used to treat symptoms of psychotic mental disorders such as schizophrenia, mania, or bipolar disorder. It should be used to treat behavioral problems in elderly patients who have dementia. Azoprazone works by changing some of the chemicals in the brain that cause psychotic disorders. So, there we go. I mean, don't just take the pill. Always consult doctors before even getting medication. But the reality there is, that is what it can be used. So let's look up Cyprazone and haptic. It's called haptic, like haptic. Haptic. I'm sorry, haptic. Novels with unique properties. So this already is a study. Somebody already is looking at the quality of this therapy here for this medication. So activation induced by high dose Cyprazone case. Let's see. Cyprazone is typically antipsychotic with a demonstrated antipsychotic profile, mediated by dopamine, serotonin. Let's see. Cyprazone, tactile hallucinations. I'm not sure what that is. Management of post-traumatic stress injury. I mean, that's one thing that would lead to haptic situational dose. I mean, but it doesn't seem like the range. So take like an example for like, somebody who's a pharmacist, or just say a doctor, right? You take zinc oxide, like 1%, right? And you put it on a bruise. Say, like, you're a kid and you're like, "Ow, like, I hurt my leg, I fell off my bike," so I put zinc oxide on my bruise, right? It's not a scrape, it's not a direct, impression, some cuts and scrapes, no abrasions, and then you just put on the bruise, and you're kinda like, "Oh, it's like my leg is numb," and I put it on my leg, and it's like, it's still not gonna do anything, right? Basically, it just kind of, sits on top, and it kind of like, and if it's like, the exact, blood flow, basically saturates into your blood and muscle and tissue right there. And then it becomes an aversion of your muscle binding to your bone and things like that. And, the receptors, and it's kind of like, a shock, right? But basically, it doesn't just start to activate. Basically, it'll just make you go to sleep. Basically, that's all it will do. So the same like kind of principle applies for antipsychotics. It's made for one reason, which is for the psyche, like for the psychology of a person, their determination, basically. So when you look at the reality of these, studies here, they are meant for the study of, the human mind. Human mind is a great range of concepts, but are related to the range of the person's like thinking skill, motor skill, their ability to read and write, or even live in a healthy situation. Says, I mean, technically, most courts in the United States, most democratic, philosophy books, so you agree with it. The concept of law is, somewhat based on that principle right there. That if you have, working, room for you ambition to fit in with the community, basically you are within the community. So your structure is like basically based within like the survival needs of that community. Um, so, when you hear the idea of like liberal idea or liberalism, it's based on the forefront of like, war almost. It's that chaotic, entry point between, one civilization versus another. And I know it's not like the greatest way of putting it, but it is the reality of like, order, and then, the idea of civilization itself. Kind of in a way, it's a hard tone to break because it's a reality of your choice and your ethic, basically. So basically, you go into this philosophy of finding estimation of what medication maybe you would need, what you use, but you might look at the unique properties between a cross mix, or what if the antipsychotic state was greater than the antipsychotic state? So you have a mind state of zero, right? You have no need for antipsychotic, right? And then you become in need of an antipsychotic, right? So let's say, for instance, the reality is you're at zero and you become one on the stage of like anger management. You're at one of five or something like that, or you're um, past the admission of like having direct like contact like with like your stage of like philosophy between like having ADHD or depression, right? Or just anxiety, general anxiety, and you're going to the straight state of like psychotic mania, or an episode that's directed towards not your overall improvement, but it could have to do with it. But it has to do with your direct your emissions of like what is like unique in the situation, what is proportional, or what is important, right? What is important? So you look at the state of like what is important, what is not important. Is laziness important in some concepts? Yeah. Is getting along with people important? Yeah, I would say that's also a direct need and cause of like something that's reliable. If you're not reliable, is that important? Yeah, I would say that's important as well. So I mean, there's all, or working orders of civilized socialization, right? I mean, they're like, you fit in with one person, so they fit in with another person. They might fit in with you, or they might fit in with another person, but the same is appreciation with anything or anyone, right? So the reality is, we can't fit in with zero for zero. They're just concepts, right? They don't act out, they don't react, they don't say anything. They're principles. They're in democracy, that's what I believe in, right? But the novice thing here, and it's like kind of examined idea about these concepts is the reality is if your order or your social order is mixed up, it might say you're acting psychotic, or this is kind of an episode in your mind. We've already reacted to this proportional thought, which might be a theory for any individual, right? Who gives it the right, who doesn't? It's probably based on the community or the means of survival. Probably not the opposite. But when you look at the books in history, you look at like what's zero in history, what has liberal ethic, what has the reality of choice, and then those freedoms, which maybe in some sorts are disagreeable but are agreeable to some, right? Those origins are the realities of like almost war, right? If you add them all up, those zeros, all those people are gone, or like they're maybe they've died, or maybe they're in prison. And I would say like prison is probably the bigger resilient there, besides the opposite, which is the opposing question of what is the precursor to prison, right? It might be war, or it might be the ethics of choice or virtue, or methodology. They're arranged all universal. So when you look back, at time, as academic kind of becomes like more of a choice, you see the realization of like ethic comes with it, and that of helping people gather that information for like as a type of survival, right? Or a means for communication, right? Or the means of maybe finding within that deviation a choice of proportional gains, which is again is the port of survival. So when those things kind of lean up, or they make those means of survival, or you make those means to meet that survival, those become a reality of choice, to declare war or not declare war. I mean, it's no one's choice to kill someone, right? That's probably in the constitution. You may not like kill other people, right? Or you be tried by like almost a jury, or for a court, right? That is within the community. That's criminal justice, like ethics right there, right? But the reality is, policy, all of those things like are considered, realities in those choices, right? So when you go from like, one straight like zero to one of the antipsychotic system, like there's tons of information there. Like how do you learn how to become bad in the situation, right? How do you learn to become good in the situation? So you might be left out with a book or something. Are they the choices of social order? I don't know. I don't decide what social order is, right? But I do know, there's things similar, right? I do know there's, values that are reactory towards other things. It might be the blue sky. It might be the reality of your choice. But the psychotic, tendencies aren't always playable. You can't just say psychotic one day, not psychotic the other day. You can't just say one versus, but you can in a way. But it's like a trick on the mind, right? I mean, if there's one psychotic tendency, it's probably the zero concept. If you believe in death, right? If you believe in, like the torture concept, or you believe in, the reality of, your own sanctity, right? It's almost like, a prison population telling the community at whole to tell itself like to stop, right? I mean, it doesn't really work that way, but it does work that way. Even in your mind, it works that way. You eat meat, so therefore it works that way, right? And then the reality is like who can ask, who can like tell me the answer there, or who can like tell me to start to believe in like what's right or wrong. So it's like something that grows on you, or tells you you're in the focus, you're in the moment, but the reality is there. And then you're like, why is it tangible to some people? Not just think about like a security and a deviated economic schema, right? You'd be able to play into someone's hand, right? Every action or reaction in that value of finding life or sanctity, there's a reaction of someone, right? But that reaction can be used against that person. It could be used into an independent theme of their emotion, right? So the reality is a choice in their social order. Right. The social order is, approximately, the reality of their social, situation. It might be the reality of their work, right? And it might take a long way to get to that reality of going to work, maybe not upset or even show up, right? But the reality is, choice in that social order is the remnants of what is social order, right? It's still social order if it's not social order. What is policy? What is social order without policy, right? So questionable, but means for survival as well. So, those are realities of choice. So, I mean, you could say like, don't repeat yourself, in this like, big, way world, don't repeat yourself, but it's a part of language, it's a part of the framework. if you're not on one with the framework, then you're at zero with someone, right? And that zero is another framework all by itself. So it gets into this like whole play of logic. What is sound and unsound? Is one place sound if the other place is unsound? Can you be somewhere if you're not somewhere else? You can't. And the answer is no, you cannot be somewhere else if you're not somewhere else, but you can be if you're imagining it, right? So the choice is your order, it's your social order, but the reality is different if it's someone else. Say, you publicly go and you're the president of the United States, and you say, well, social order is one thing, but the reality of choice. I agree with someone's self-defense case, or I disagree with it, or I agree with someone's social choice or social order, right? It's not in policy to say, you're the overhead of policy. You're, the commanding officer, chief of a democracy. So you pick, the democratic thought in that situation, which is lenient on the idea of voting, right? So you have one effective, group of people saying, I might vote for something. How do you count who is right and wrong in that situation? You might count it by, like, say, a logarithm that's used over and over and over and over again, kind of like, to be polite, social order in a way. So, the reality of choice, a president has, controlling order over, facts and effects, right? Like facts and effects in a way, not the effects of life, because, there's social orders in reality, right? So, this take of it, and some of it has to do with security, some of it has to do with, the concept of like alarm. So, within like, let's say the range of psychedelics. So, and I was looking at, articles for psychedelics here for an essay I was just writing on psychedelics. Basically, I came up with 30 sources. They're all range differently. There's a lot of conglomerate information, but none of it is about the effectiveness of the quality or quantity of drugs, right? Has to do with, the reality of choice, but when you look up something like a schedule for like overdoses, or the reactory force of like what's going to alarm the phone I have if someone were to have a drug overdose, right? Like if I'm a medical worker or something like that. It's a reality of choice. It's right there, but it's not really put in place. So the effectiveness is not a social order, but it's just not exchanged correctly, right? That's another questionable concern, but it's a reality of policy. When you say criminal justice, you always say policy, because without social order, you don't have any concrete effectiveness. There's nothing there, right? So that social order is choice, right? So going on to this concept of the congressional thought of an antipsychotic moment, mood, these disordered thoughts, right? It's kind of like a stir. One person might suggest, I have a mood issue because I saw it on TV, right? I mean, is that the reality of this? I don't know. That's even more tougher than the other one. Communications is a huge topic, right? It's a large topic, but it doesn't have a general order or purpose, right? I mean, chemical bond is kind of like communication. Can you get more social order from that? Yeah, but it doesn't teach you about thinking about the identity of each element and things like that, right? It's kind of like a very plain view. Like in the criminal justice system, you say plain view, is an orientation, but you just list out the facts. And are they always the tippy top or the middle range? No, sometimes they're very low and they're not even on the target, right? It's a questionable art form, right? Criminal justice is kind of like an art form in a way, but the reality is, if you have a safety of mature ideas, right? Say you see the trombone player with the trombone in the back of their car and they're driving high on drugs. Does it make it right or wrong, or does it make them not the best trombone player? I don't know. So the question is, a whole philosophy there of like culture, of ethics, right? Of how policy interacts with these new evident ideas, right? They're always evolving. So let's go on to this analysis of Zephyr-Zedone, and I got off on this like little tangent there, but the reality is what is social order without a story, right? What they say in music is no LP has no story without an LP, right? Right, but the opposite, in modern times they say there's no LP with no story. Oh, no LP without a story, something like that. But EP is different, right? Because it's not almost an art form, right? It's like a disc, or like a 5, 10, 15 time playing record that you loop on like a diamond edge, right? It goes woo, 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 like a photon, right? Okay, so Basically, let's go into the reality of this second generation antipsychotic triggers macrophage inflammatory response in vitro. So, Zeprazone acts on non-activated macrophages, trigger inflammatory response. Zeprazone increases pro-inflammatory cytokine levels. Zeprazone has a lowering effect on IL-10 and inflammatory cytokine, and cytosine upregulates IL-1, IL-6, T, and F alpha genes and downregulates IL-10 gene. Results could explain Zebradone's allergen inflammatory side effect. You're really hearing it. I don't know what that is. Yeah, some of this looks a little bit. I've never really looked at this medication so much before. Let's see if we can kind of look into it. Will it even play? Oh, it won't even play. Um, so let's see. Let's see if I can get it. Um, Stay with me, Speechify. Oh, it won't even play it. Okay, so if it can even read in my language, I think it will. So let's stay with it. Okay, so that's an interesting thing. They have a concept here of I thought this was interesting that says as evaluated by MTT and flow cytometry assays and presented higher levels of oxidant molecules involved in inflammatory response to nitric oxide, superoxide, reactive oxygen species, and pro-inflammatory cytokines, and then these here. So well, that's the opposite effectiveness I thought this drug would have had. So, I mean, look at the receptors, or no, they just look at the molecule itself, I suppose. Well, maybe not. So look at the molecules here. So look at it. It's interesting. So it has a reactive force between this cytosine and the cytosine, the cell proliferation, um, cytosine, and then the cytosine outside. So maybe it's not nitric like I thought in the first place, because a fruit would be nitric in some way, like ascorbic acid in like apple juice is a nitrogen base, right? But technically this drug doesn't have it. It doesn't cure any muscle habituation through haptic issues. So basically, the proliferation makes inflammatory greater. So is it possibly, related to the nitrogen structure? I would maybe presume so. I mean, so look at the introduction here. Probably nitrogen isn't really looked at that way, but the connective, like, tissue, um, is a little bit like that. Serotonin, um, it might be, more of chemical that is current towards like something like oxygen or hydrogen, right? But um positively charged, I think, right? But the reactors here look somewhat different. So you can look at it right here. Let's see. So it doesn't say if it has really anything to do with haptic. I suppose I don't really see it. But it's a good question. You're like valeric acid. And if you're unaware what valeric acid is, it's a compound that was originally was a valproic acid, is used to treat bipolar disorder. But it was also originally used to act or be used as a a typical reagent for wondering or checking why chemicals are what was it? So valeric acid used for testing. I'm sorry, valproic. Valproic is just a test amount of valproic acid. You test is used in a person's blood to monitor. Medication is within the therapeutic range for treating conditions like epilepsy, seizures, bipolar disorder, or migraine headaches. As test is used to measure to do ensuring the dose is effective without causing harmful side effects. This is often called therapeutic drug monitoring, as the level needs to be carefully managed to optimize treatment and minimize a potential toxicity. Key points about valproic acid testing to check valproic acid. Well, this isn't entirely what I was talking about. Valproic was used originally to test something. I just read it or just saw a video about it. Let's see, testing originally. Originally, so let's look at valproic acid. No, this doesn't even show anything. So valproic acid used for testing what? Ridge. Okay, so let's look at valproic acid. Maybe here. Let's see. Story of valproic acid. Here we go. So to treat lithium salts. A remarkable story of proic acid. Oh, there we go. When the American chemist Beverly S. Burton prescribed the synthesis of valeric acid, you can imagine its future impact on therapeutic practice. In fact, for almost a century, valproic acid was thought to be pharmacologically inert and being a liquid was used as a solvent. It was only until 1963 that its anticonvulsant properties were serendipitously discovered. So, can I even get access to this? Let her. Let's see. I might be able to get access. Oh, actually, I think I can. So that's good. Let's get access. Ooh, even though I have no idea if you'll see this or not. Oh, you do see this, but don't worry about stuff. So, nice. All right. Oh, it even does all that. That's good. All right. So let's look into this. Skip right now. Or that's good. That's good. I don't know. Let's look in. Let's look. Oh, here we go. So let's see. The remarkable story of valeric acid. I don't even know if I'm allowed to do it, but it shows up on the screen. So maybe then therefore the article play. So let's go. So when the American chemist, let's get the song Spotify to read it, if it can. Oh, it can't do that. So let us see if it then can. Oh. So it's only like 4 paragraphs, but it's something apparently. So let's read it. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it shows a different world between the what's it, valeric acid before this. Before this, there was opium. So I mean, yeah, play of it with like a stick or something, but in reality of today. But I mean, from all off the medicine here to compared to what they had years ago, there was not really much. I mean, there was. Oh, we could look it up. Let's look it up. So, what medicine uh, was used for antipsychotics before let's see, how do I even say it? It's valproic acid. Okay, so it's just a general thing, right? So, let's see. What was the first antipsychotic medication? Chlorazepine was the first one. So let's look at chlorazepine. So chlorazepine, and that one's, I think, the one derived by plants. If I think I'm getting it correct, it's the plant that was found um, in um, in Germany, like in I think Europe. I think it was from Europe. Okay, so clozapine is derived from what? And there's so many articles, and I'm using M2 Max. I mean, gosh. So clozapine, marketed under the brand name Thorazine large Actil, among others, is an antipsychotic medication used to treat psychotic disorders. So, I mean, it's a reverse. I mean, it's antipsychotic, so it reverses the dopamine in your brain. I would say Thor's. This is I would say this is clorazaprazine. Thorazine, or Largest is a drug that is used to basically stop the dopamine in your brain. Basically, it stops the dopamine in your brain, I guess. So how was it synthesized? And it's like, is there so much medication? I mean, for doctors, no, basically, in a way, like people need to done the information. Doctors might researchers might need to read it. So doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a medication. So it's not like a medication like anything else. People can administer death drugs here in the United States, right? So, um, it could be used for anti-anxiety or for agitation. I mean, agitation is different from person to person. So it is a concept there. So agitation, if you look that up, state of extreme arousal that can cause a person. I'm sorry, you probably can't read it. Can you read it? I don't know. So agitation is a state of extreme arousal that can cause a person to feel tense, irritable, and unable to relax. It can range state of I thought it said something else for a second. Okay, so it can range from mild to severe and can be brief or long lasting. So it's there. Yeah. Okay. So all right. So let's look at what was it? Chlorazepine, thorazine. How was it derived? It was derived. Oh, thorazine advertisement. Oh, thorazine. Okay. All right. So in 1933, the French pharmaceutical company Laboratories Rhone Folek began to search for antihistamines in 1914 synthesized promazine, a phenothiazine derivative, which was found to have more pronounced sedative and antihistamic effects than earlier drugs. A year later, the French surgeon Pierre Huguenard used promethazine together with pethidine. Pethidine also known as mepridine, and sold under the brand name Demerol, among others, as a fully synthetic opioid pain medication of the phyllopapiridine class, synthesized in 1938 as a potential ARS agent by the German chemist Otto as part of a cocktail to induce relaxation in surgical patients. Well, okay, another surgeon, Henry Labertil, believed the compound stabilized central nervous system by causing artificial hibernation. And you're staying with me. I mean, I'm literally zero for zero, never this much information. So, causing artificial hibernation and describe the state as a sedation without narcosis. Okay, so promethazine. I mean, this is promethazine, right? So promethazine, sold and brand name. First generation antihistamine sedative and I am lost. So how what am I so look at the history as it composed though. I think I'm missing like a paragraph here. So okay. Mm, oh, okay, maybe not. So artificial disease. So it was distributed for testing physicians. Oh, then no. Another thing I'm not really understanding. I guess I did. Oh, it's he suggested that they developed a compound with better stabilizing properties in 1950. Oh, okay, so produced a series of compounds that included or sort of chlorpromazine. So okay, so basically they discovered this drug through another drug. I think this is. I don't know if this is a drug, but we can look. Basically, it's a used for or as the original antipsychotic was originally used for schizophrenia, I suppose, or a hypothesized theory of schizophrenia, psychosis with like Freudian start thing, but I don't think so. I don't know unless they removed it, but I forget the plan. It's called like SERP, starts with SERP, I think. So basically, I think it's scheduled drug. Yeah. In reality, like there's the little seeds that like they're big, like something. But the reality is these drugs are antagonists, basically. So the reality is the supportive reality of this is the drug reacts differently. So something like valeric acid, Depakote is supposed to be to block the dopamine stronger than something like maybe Gita, maybe, but Gita is probably strong. So when you go into those medications, they are different than another class of medications, which are atypical antipsychotic. Anyway, I think I'm sounding funny right now, right? There's different classes here, so we can go into the antipsychotic properties over again. Antipsychotics, all right, psychotics. So, class of prescription works, types of antipsychotics. Let's see. Types of antipsychotics. So there's first generation antipsychotics. So, okay, it doesn't list them here. Okay, list of antipsychotics. Okay, it doesn't list them. Okay, first gen, and then second generation. Okay, so let's see. Older drugs here, typicals: haprodol, loxapine, Zuclo, penthixol. All the drugs mostly used to treat psychosis, most likely to cause EPS tremor, stiffness, restlessness, and there's also stories about people having serious issues with these drugs, overdose, different things like that. Higher dyskinesia risks. There's other lists. Organ damage was one of them. So I mean, there you go. And then there's atypicals: quintilpine, razapine, apropozole. Newer drugs treat psychosis, bipolar depression, more likely to cause weight gain, diabetes, and then lower tardive dyskinesia risks. So that's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. So you got that. It's interesting. So I mean, we were looking at articles there for about the haptics of the medication for not for valproic acid, proic acid, looking for the the possible uses of Zyprexa. So activation induced by high dose Zyprexa, right? So we're looking to see if it has any beneficial, quality. Let's say maybe synthesize something or a way to synthesize as a way to um, work with the haptic system in the body, right? So to clean, clean it, or the unitary system, right? So, Zephyrdazone is a typical antipsychotic administrated antipsychotic profile. Uh, do, 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 do. Okay, so let's see if we can read this article here. And it cannot once again. So it's all on someone like me to do this. And so, I mean, so we can activate this as a case report. So, I mean, not really fundamentally completely, I don't know, agreeable. I mean, suppose it's a score that's different than some other score, right? So, specifically, is it right from wrong? I don't know. I mean, is it right from wrong to look at a case floor that's completely open? I mean, I didn't have to have any access to this, did I? So I don't know. So we're looking at the activation induced by high dose zypresidone report. So I mean, the reality there is, looking at the titrated use, the other uses there, and then the biblical side, which is the activation right there. So yeah, it probably wouldn't go significantly into a trial study. So wouldn't be necessary to see outside, even though, it's on psychiatry.com. I mean, how would I report it? So let's look. So Zephyrdzone's haptic, and who wouldn't agree with all that information about hapticity, like, getting rid of viruses from the blood and body, how chemicals are oriented in the work. How is that not for information? Okay, so let's see haptic treatments, treatments, other uses or other uses we use that one. So the treatment of mania, no. And then why is that? Because I mean, like when you're in this mania episode, maybe a medication were to use somehow, as a way to depress, or distress the body in a way. Possible role, is something as like a first line, medicine for like austere medicine. Like if this patient was, in an agitated state, or if they were in mania, you might prescribe them something so their body doesn't footage off, like it doesn't like die. Right. So like in reality, a soldier fights, right? So, if it's good for TBI, maybe it's good for something else. Who knows? But, the reality of the side effects, I mean, of different things like blood loss, I mean, these all have to be taken accounted, right, or really fast, obviously. So I mean, like even if it was a low dose, you would just kind of look at this, as a questionable thing. So Zebrazone, other uses besides psychiatry. And I don't think I'm going to find anything. I mean, maybe Zephyrdazone is also known for the geodone, is an antipsychotic medication that is used for off-label of other conditions. And if you're sticking with me, I got 0 for 0 there of V count. So unless you're listening to this, I mean, you must have something else going on. But look at so basically you have Zephyrdazone, and then you have, let's see, treatment, delirium, agitation, irritability, and autism, ADHD symptoms. I don't see it. I don't literally see it. I mean, it doesn't connect to anything. Is it a science to look into the side of the brain? I know it's not. I know it. I know there's a cleaning that works like the cytos, right? A little bit with cytos, right? Kind of like plastic would, right? So plastic is ambivalent towards something like a magnesium-bound protein chain or something like that. So, the magnesium-bound protein chain, synthesis of plastic, electrons in the brain or axion, right, or neurons, right, they create, like what an effective, like like a typical antidepressant would work with, right? But it would be something that would react with the blood, right? So it would have to do the blood-brain barrier, the sensory, sensory. spots of the brain, or the cortex, right? Or the CNS as well. So everything in your brain connected to CNS, basically. So basically, those work like, the values of converting that blood into reuse or reuse, right? So that has to do with your active memory, possibly, or your recall. So also that would have to do with your power, how your brain shuts off at night, goes to sleep, and then it basically regulates those things, the power in your brain, right? So the reality there is, possibly, so there's voltage, there's gain in your brain, right? So they're all real, but there's no haptic level there. So what would create a deterrent for that state? So let's see, there's one bound from another bound, which is remnant of your body cycling and recycling your cerebral or vascular system, right, or your CNS, right? Again, so you have your ability to talk, your ability to hear, your ability to structure, and you have your ability to shut something off, right? So if you were to shut off, like your cells and power, you basically get to sleep, right? And the reality of taking antipsychotic is different. So your power level and structure, it works like a returned decaying property, right? So the decayed property is like kind of a repeated phosphate in the blood. So it's like kind of an amino acid that's split into like two electrons, right? So basically almost like a proton shell would be. So proton shell in the human body, because I don't think so, but I mean, the body technically synthesizes chemicals like it. So like the kidney, ketosis, and like ketamine is like the ketamine you'd find in electrons, right? Because it's pure as a chemical acid, right? So if like tomato is slick enough to cause or clean silver here, right? There's a way to clean the kidney, but there's no way the kidney to clean something else. I mean, it wouldn't make sense, right? I mean, if the thing you're looking at is like kidney like ketosis, I'm not sure what that is, but the reality is the voltage gain dissipate of like zero decay, right? It is a process of like feces, right? Feces, or like the metabolism product is going through your body. It's stronger, tougher than lead, but I mean, like in a way, it's like more radioactive, right? Isotope is not bound as much. Uranium ions make it more reactive when it's greater, right? So I mean, when you have greater things, it's more reactive. So basically, you have what are like side effects in that situation, right? So take for example, you take a large amount of nitrogen in the space, geodone. Let's look at the synthesis. Let's geodone. So other uses. How it's made. Let's see how it's made. The synthesis of zepridazone. So we look at the synthesis here, and it says it's meant for 20 milligrams, 30, 40 milligrams. I mean, that could be high. It could be fairly high for something that's chambered. And medicine, I mean, you keep like, zinc iodine chamber. I mean, it's a reactory chemical. I mean, you could say, yeah, 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 yeah. You're just like, or you could like, no, yeah. I mean, you'd like second question yourself and say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Or you could, put it polite, this is, it's chambered. So it also has, deviation point, has different things. But let's look at the quantity or quality feedback of, oh, it even has a degradation, an elusive degradation product of zepridazone. Oh, how interesting is that? I didn't even think I would get to this chapter here. Gosh. So literally looking at it, and if you're with me right now, zero, right here, zero. For zero accounts, I mean, I make no money. My wall is paywalled by the elusive alien called the VPN. So scratch that VPN, go out and get no VPN. I'm just joking. So okay, so here we go. We got this. It's a reference page. Read about it. Can the intent of my file here now open this? No, it can't. Okay, so let's look at this and we'll just take a listen to it. Okay, so I think we need um, we it's that I think, like, we got another study that said it's too sulfuric or too nitrogen based, so it's, like, kind of questionable, like, if fruit has nitrogen base, if a derivative has nitrogen base, why do you have a nitrogen base that has 2 nitrogens? Okay, so we're going back to the books here, and I'm calling this as one of those bullshits, right? So, basically, when you have 2 nitrogen chains, they basically work like molecular structures, like a photage in a molecule, right? Same principle goes for atomic mass and you sound thinking in atoms, right? So basically, you have the molecular structure like photage, but when it's DNA, means the whole axiom is connected. So in an axiom, that would be the spindle or the top, right? So you take the bound potential, which is the spindle on top, and then it creates, that, and then it's attached to like something like RNA. So you have, a photo chain right there. So basically, it's connected, and then it creates like something that is like imprinted into or coded into like a codex, right? So the index or like the script there. So basically that's a DNA or DNA buffer, right? So basically it's represented by like the decaying property of DNA, but it's repaired. So it's like repaired through RNA and synthesis, things like that. Right. So basically, I mean like food, right? So like basic like if like bread grew mold on it, man. Like and like basically it like created like a new effect. It'd be like that. So basically, and then you got like like say you're a railroad worker with like a piece of bread and mold, and like you have a spike on you, basically, and you're like, this is my last spike, and you're driving into the railroad, and you're like spike, 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 and then you say like you have the last piece of bread, you break it for you, and like you eat it, but the mold like protected the betameter of the bread. So it's the same like principle of like cheese, right? So there's that. So there's like livable use in the situation, and there's like liable ready to use in the situation, like to protect the axions of the chain, right? So like the DNA goes together, synthesize each like chemical reactory, but it is a synthesis, right? Like if it's going to you right now, chemical bonds are reactory. So like say you have a 9 0 that represents something on a scale. So maybe it's AC out of the tangent of a polar part of DNA, and then you have the 1 2 or 2 1 cyclical. So when you go north on like or the polarized way, you don't count it like it's always spindling, it's always moving, or else that could be, well, I got you, they'd be fucking dead. So if you go west or you go south, basically it's different. So the south is the uncounted register, and those always duplicating. So it's the process like a human is always trying to earn potential, right? The next one up, but it doesn't create the potential. It says like I want to be clean or my cells hibernate basically, and it gets functional. The same property for functional like phosphates or sulfur, right? The question is basically when that 90 replicates, right? Any material is technically the same, basically. When that material replicates, basically, that sulfur is enclosed in oxygen, right? And then hydrogen. But again, the buffer is always spindling just like DNA, correct? Because it's based on a carbon residual. So why is a carbon relay like that? Because it's delayed, right? But it's also descriptively decaying all the time. So basically, it's what in chemistry you consider right in the middle, the CD part of chemical bonds right there. So the axiom, which is like 0, axiom, which is like T, the T chart or management script, and then the value of something like iodide, right? Like so it creates a distribution effect and then decays and spreads. Right? So the variance is like the RNA in the body takes that beta protein wave or photane wave or whatever it's called, like arsenic would, and it spreads to the next level, which is like median of the beta wave right there, which is residual, kind of like a return, but it's scripted differently, right? Because it's choice over virtue of the DNA script, right? That is like an echo, right? It keeps on going and going and going and going, but then it's repeated until you get to the bound potential of that bond, right? The bound potential of that bond is like a reaction, right? So basically, it is like the choice in matter here. So replication value, and then you'll look it up, how synthesis of cells work. Synthesis cells work, and then how a body of cells work and reacts, right? And that reaction leads to lose certain potentials, which are the potentials of a value that are lower than a granule, right? Like, macro phosphate channels, they'll work the same. They change, right? So it's the big potential they're going to change. Like if you go P, you change. You change basically. You hit that the marker of negative? No, you hit the marker of zero. You have zero remaining vowel, you have zero remaining volume in your body, you have zero remaining. So therefore, you have a potential that's greater for polarization. So the polarization is a difference then. So if the differential is returned, right, then it is a sum of zero potential. Just like on Newton, but the relayed potential of Newton is a variation of beta. So basically, the germ cell, just like if you can look it up, a germ cell is basically like sulfur is equaling the dirt input, right? This is how they used to make and manufacture dirt, right? Is a potential of the differential of the value of something that's greater. So kind of like light, kind of like, color of decaying properties are similar to it, but it's like almost like an antithesis, right? Because there's an imprint, like a decayed imprint, right? So if you have like the imprint right there, if you have a population chain, a pool chain, and like unlike programming, right? Not all programming is like that, right? And then you have the value that is different. So not like a negative, okay, like a differential property. What do we call a distribution? Distribution of y. So y is the axis. So the distribution there is via a population or pool. So why the population or pool? It's a differential there. So value is based on motion or cumulative motion. Motion or cumulative motion is not regulated by, no. It's regulated by a true sum. This is proven sum. So that's greater than 8. So it's like, so 8, greater than 9. So that's the potential. It's like 8 is greater than 9. It's basically like laid out, or plain view, like in the plain view doctrine. Right? I didn't spell it right, but the doctrine. If you're watching right now, it's 0 for 0 right now. Okay, so basically this isn't my job at all, but I'm doing this. Okay, so the reality of the alkaline cell, basically the reaction of the alkaline. So let's list this. Whoa. Okay, the book. Let's go way back. So I think we might have not talked about alkaline yesterday. So alkaline is completely on a different liter scale, different meter scale, and all of these things when laid out, right? So 100 to 9 proportionally for something like this is like saying 0. And if you're a medical student and you don't get this right, you're dead. So 0 to 101 or 0 to 9 because it's repeated in a fashioned cell. So that's like a photic cell, right? So the cell there is a cell membrane within a cell, basically. So the cell is degradant, basically. I mean, it's a G equals Ty. I'll put the multiplication system in there. By the zero opposing force, zero product, times the footage, or it's divided by pp, a reactor rate chain. There's a whole bunch of other numbers in there, so the Euclid number and stuff like that. But the point is, policy is basically like a soup you would eat. So the cell is a soup that you add on to a distribution like RNA. So why not RNA? Why DNA? Why DNA? What not iRNA? Right. So take the example, and I'm not your teacher, right? So you take the example of 2, 3, right? You take the potential, which is a decagram, right? Which is greater than a sum, something like that, right? Which is bigger. Kind of like a magnesium chain is to the opposite. In fact, no, the effect is to the opposite of the derangement of the distribution. So that's the distribution, which this one is based on 6, based on the proportional value of 6 chains and a cross, right? So that's T5. That's like a median chain in something that is greater than the potential. So the range in this situation, a lot of people don't know how to use their equipment, might look like 80,000. That's the potential of the value divided by the sum of a neutral element. In that instance, a neutral element would be like a pH of 9, right? A pH of 9 is not really tested. It's not a value, but it's a true amount from a distribution from a high to a low through a reaction. But the reaction is almost photosynthesis, right? It's like if you created a plastic cell and the machine, or you looked at the plastic cell and said, this is what the plastic cell is doing today, or the metal cell, that's what it is. It's equipment malfunction, right? Equipment malfunction, it's like kind of like, is my TV made out of like material that was like synthesized from bones? And you're like, no, it surely was not synthesized out of bones, and then you're kind of like, I'm pretty sure. I've been waiting to do that joke all day. But the reality is, though, the situation is kind of like, the vitamin like B in a way, vitamin B, right? It starts with like hydrolysis in some sort of format, right? And it messes up. I mean, usually it turns into a poisonous, like almost like what you would get back in the day when they made it. It would probably create like an arsenic based vitamin C, because the distribution was based on the Y chain, or what they considered the Y obtuse, right? So basically the Y axis. But were these opinions formed? No. So when you backtrack to English, right, there's the thing called no silos, right? So the silo word is like, what's silo mean? Silo mean in English? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. English. Cyclo. Oh, cycle. No, silo. Maybe I spelled it wrong. Silo. Silo means syndical. No, in English journalism. Let's look that up. Maybe I'm the wrong one here. No, I just don't see it at all. It's structure for storing materials or military installation, a part of company that operates independently. Structure for storing materials, military installation, part of the company. In grammatical English, writing. Let's try that one. I don't know. I mean, it's probably figurative, but in a more different world, right? So, no, I mean, writing style. So. Okay, must have meant something else, but the reality is grammar, right? So basically, the reality there is a chain that's effective towards part of 1, part of 2, right? But it's ever expanding. So based on something So the value is effective towards one based on like a logarithm, right? So basically, it's cyclical. So basically, let's see. The potential there is whatever it is. So I won't go into this. It's going to break your mind. Basically, you're going to come up with disagreements, and you're going to believe in them, right? So basically, what I can see in cyclical acid production, say like the plastic is acidic. Okay, so basically, there was no typical way to effectively ask or question, whether that was formulated through plastic. So, does it, fundamentally, show any information about how something typically would make this composition? I mean, I didn't see any, natural occurrence of this chemical at all. Like, any deviated, information about how the properties of the chemical were made. I don't see it. I just have to believe it. Whatever I'm seeing here, I'm not seeing, on here. So basically, it just makes itself basically right. Okay. So basically, I see what I see here, literally. Basically, let's look at the potential of the volume here if it was made, right? So look at the possible chapters here of let's see, site of oxidation could be sulfur. Chemical intuition suggests that the most probable site of oxidation could be the sulfur atom, leading to the hypothesis that the degradation product had a S dotted S dioxide or cyclical sulfamide structure that were that we named internally as the sulf one. Interesting. So plausibly actually more correct now. So basically the sulf was, they say sulf one. This is a new structure they named here, sulfide or cyclical sulfamide structure. So that's basically not something normal, right? It's an occurring substrate of this, what is a degradation product. So chemical intuition suggested that the most probable site of oxidation could be the sulfur atom. Let's see, leading to the hypothesis that the degradation product had a sulfur dioxide that we named internally as the sulf1. So I think that's exactly how Lysol works, isn't it? So okay, so is like it's somewhat like it works with different chemicals, right? So in a antipsychotic drug substance used to treat schizophrenia containing one data data two benzoyethazole, a piperidazine in a 6-chloro-2 oxidyl heterocycle ring. A few years ago, it forced degradation study under alkaline stress conditions, yielding previously unidentified compound for which a low resolution nominal mass of 444 was determined by HPLC UVMS. I mean, maybe it's flawed, maybe it isn't. You always have to think that way. Mass value is 32 mass, and it's larger than the mass of zyperzidone itself, suggesting that the degradation in question contains 2 additional oxygen atoms relative to zyperzidone. So that's kind of like zinc oxide is, right? So I mean, any phosphate that connects to oxygen, if you're unaware, isn't always the thing that connects to oxygen. It's something that connects to bound hydrogen-based oxygen, right? So the tissue is basically not connected to oxygen like that, but it's a buffer, right? So buffer in solution, sulfur. Apparently, that would be connected to paper, right? Paper is phosphate. So paper is a biopotential of that phosphate. So is water, but the decentralized properties or cyclical properties of water is that's very salt bound, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean that's salt based. But the oxygen rate in water could be low, so the phosphate, like paper, is valuable. So it could be a return product of the paper, right? So the value is like a phosphate that's less than number one, so it's zero, or it's a negative charged ion potential because say you put lead on paper or graphite on paper, it's the slickest, right? Or that's the least remainder of a radioactive isotope, right? So the potential there is something that's duplicating as well, because you can see it's relative towards sanitation, which is a duplicative property, grows or decays through a priority that is through like something like a degradation. So that's hot to exchange, but it's not extremely hot. It's protensive, so it's not an ultimate structure, which would be lower or through a quality that's greater than 1 or 0 in a logarithmic portion. So it is valuable, right, in that situation. So it's greater than the number 2 possibly, right? So, but isn't. So it's positively negative, or it's an electron charge that is quantitatable, right? So like a ringed proportional, oxygen, right? So that would be oxygen with 1 pentameter to it, right? Which could be like lead, or it could be something like graphite, right? So that phosphate in that instance could be like a metal. Like metal is a magnesium, right? A diaparty of magnesium is not something mixed with chemicals in organic sulfate, right? So the potential principle there is a magnesium phosphate is like a organic channel of magnesium sulfide, right? So that's like something on a sponge, or like charcoal, or something like porcelain, right? So the difference there is a value that's a sum that's 0, right? So ultimately, could this be a negative attractive particle, like a nuclear avoided chemical, like a decaying nuclide? So you could look at it. It could be a mixture of both of them, right? So the potential there is sulfur as like 2 nitrogen atoms as well. So nitrogen is another possibility. So if you have 2 nuclear tied nitrogen based chemicals, would they value each other in that same symmetrical value? Would the axion be semicircular? Because if you have a y-axis, right, and if you have salted spindles, how does it spin inward and against the formal repetition of the pattern, which would go with magnesium, right? So that would be oxygen based, right? So an organic phosphate would have oxygen in it, right? Otherwise, the paper would have carbon in it, and then it would be based on carbon, or be carbon derivative, right, or differential between carbon and then a nucleic acid, like alcohol, right? So basically, looking at the degradation here, let me look at the principle of the product here. So at the review chapter, see if it's possible to even look at this. So no, it's still not possible to look at this. So bummer, right? So that's that. So look at the degradation of the product is represented, still not there. Look at the elusive degradation of product is represented, still not there, obviously. And then look at the elusive degradation of still not there. So antipsychotics, on drugs here. Okay, so I'm on a set that I can use, right? So let's look for other things right here. Wow, zipperton degrade is a good way of putting it. So we found out a new way to formulate this idea of an objective. So I mean, the objective here is maybe cure these cells from cellular repression, right? So whatever that is, or degradation, right? Themselves, and then taking cells or you know um, alleviating let's say like matter like dopamine or effective dopamine within the system, which is like let's say like fentanyl or like something else. Maybe this one works more like for a bruise, right? Or something like another one would work for the degradation properties of something else. So illusionary, right? So it's the properties that are spindling within a mean that are rational. So let's look at the cells again. What we have here, um, not a whole lot of information. It's really like lithium. I'm not sure. It just says lithium there. So okay. All right. So I didn't look at that before, but oh wow. Okay. So it triggers a macrophage inflammatory response. Is it interesting? Is it not? I don't literally know. Unique with its properties. Can I even read it? Let's see if we can read it. View full access. I think we may be able to read this one. So a novel psychotropic with unique properties. Oh, and then or I'm not allowed to read it at all. So let's see if I can read this article. Um, I can only see the abstract here or pay a insane amount of money. And now this is just a central computer connected to my, let's see, my actual school account, even if it was not on my school speak. That's it. So, gosh, I mean, I can't even read it. So, would I even be able to try? Let me try. I'm just joking. Let me try. I don't see it. So it is what it is. I don't. They don't even use it anymore. They don't even use medicine anymore. But it's questionable. Is it questionable to use this medicine or not use this medicine, or is it to arrange this medicine in a different way? I don't know. It gets down to me. I just don't. I don't know what is this and this. I mean, it's like one of the keep of secrets. You know what I'm saying? So, Zebrazone. Synthesis of mechanism of action. Mechanism of action. Mechanism of action is other drugs having efficiency in schizophrenia is unknown. However, this has been proposed the drug's efficacy in schizophrenia is medicated through combination of dopamine type 2. Oh, my keypad froze. It was like, like I don't want to move at all. I go, I mean, like, the alarm or the bup, 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 bup. It's a joke about babies, but let's see. I mean, babies, like, if they always have that look and stuff like that, right? So, um, yeah, I don't know. It's probably something people would stay away from because it has norepinephrine in it, because it has like bonds of something that is chemist, right? I would say something like norepinephrine would be the most risky because it has like something crazy in it, something super crazy, like super dangerous, super crazy, and definitely probably worse than footage at some points. And the mechanism of that is kind of like the rate of contradicted oxygen, right? That amount is skeptical based on something else. So okay, so I don't see it. So let's move on to the next drug here, and I think I've had enough of that one because it didn't even show up. So what other ones do we have here? Let's see. I have this one, and it didn't even have the reference in it, which is again too bad that there's no references in a real thing. So I mean, we have this one, which is seprosidone, mechanism of action, and then the pretensive cursors. But it doesn't talk about magnesium. It doesn't talk about the Dockers of the how to make it, right? So how it's made, it doesn't say anything. It just shows the impairment. The product label has no patients using Zeperton with hepatic impairment. Zeperton is systematically metabolized via the liver. Caution to be observed when given with hepatic impairment. So it's, I guess, not even been to trial for something like that. or else. So, gosh, basically, the reality there is, I mean, it shares some sort of equivocal effect. So at least the committee's done their job. So basically, looking at the results here, um, and you're like, can I use antipsychotics and not have used drugs? But obviously, you can have ever used antipsychotics. You could have never used drugs in your entire life. So that's a known fact, right? So I mean, you could be no drug user, right, and you could have used antipsychotics big time. So um, I'm just who I am. So I just know it. I mean, I just know it. So basically, the reason there is, what it is. So taking may lead to decreased bone density. Oh, that doesn't sound good. I'm pretty sure bone density is always necessary to have, right? So it could create decay in your bones. I don't think anyone wants any decay in their bones, right? So, like take 10% over time and your bone just snaps. Like that would be that would be wrong, right? That would be real wrong. So let's look into it here. So reduced Zeprazone levels resulting in some therapeutic levels of Zeprazone. Well, ketoconazole increases Zeprazone levels. So I'll have to look into this here. Potentially, um, it could mean different things, right? Might one say one thing one time, and then the other person might say, no. Or the other person might say, like, you have a system here that is different than other systems. Zeprazone might be long QT with a baseline of echocardiograph is recommended and monitored subsequently. So, I mean, and the toxicity, you might say something else. Binding affinity to histamine H1 receptors. Somnolence can occur. Susceptibility at toxic levels. Practice system body temperature regulation, and case management are implemented. The risk of SGFO, dysmotility, and aspiration pneumonia in other older patients must be assessed before giving this drug. So we didn't know the precursor of ammonia is in there. Antipsychotics in general have been associated with both of these conditions, particularly in patients with Alzheimer's disease. Have been associated with both of these conditions, particularly in patients with Alzheimer's disease. Okay. According to the analysis of cumulative cases reported in users poison control centers, Zeprazone overdose is associated with high mortality. Constantly in an overdose, ensure the patient remains ventilation and intubation may be necessary. IV access is required with gastric lavage after intubation if the patient is unconscious. Charcoal is also an option along with laxative to assist with drug clearance. According to analysis of cases reported in the US, 0% overdose is overdose with high mortality. Oh, that sounds terrible. So I mean, must not have decayed teeth in that instance, or you must not have any chronic homelessness. I mean, most chronic homeless people I know will have teeth decay, or have eaten from metal, or have basically have had eaten from plastic, which plastic is high in argon. So there's that, or you have to have no electrical radiation in a way. I mean, to have it completely remaining without a substrate of something, right? So of something, right? So the energy from a vacuum chamber takes hydrogen and oxygen and more power than hydrogen and oxygen. So in the diet. So particularly vacuums of a home are the same way. So okay. Zeprazone is a widely used antipsychotic drug. So initiates therapy with a drug, but patient follow-up is generally performed by primary care. Okay, so we have this. I'll save it for later here. Let me save this print view. Print it. Save as a PDF here. Good old Mac. Save you. Where we save you at? Let's save you at this one here. Let's save you here in this new folder called Well, student 5. I'm really tired right now. Okay, let's go to the next one after that. So, side effects. We have this one here. We'll just print it out just because. Is NAMI a good source? It is an organized source, so it is a source of that. So, go to the next one here. Deprezone. Oh, breastfeeding. So ticks. 46, 40 to 60. Floppy muscle babies works as near delivery can be monitored for symptoms such as stiff or floppy muscle tone, drowsiness, agitation, tremors, trouble breathing, and problems with feeding. If a baby develops symptoms, in most cases, the symptoms are expected to go away in a few days without long-term health effects. It is important that your health care providers know you are taking Deprezone so that if symptoms occur, your baby can get care for its need. Okay. Just chance, birth defects, cancel miscarriage, kind of make it harder for me to get pregnant. I don't know. So apparently it says mother to baby, and we didn't read that before. So okay, all right. Well, so it is what it is. So okay, all right. So let's go into the next one. So let's in the next one. So like if say like you're a first responder, you're like, I have to get like a medication that is like used for like the potential of like, decreasing dopamine a lot. I mean, you have a list of them, you're like, I have this shot formula, I can't give the shot formula out, or like your doctor, right? And then you're like, I can't really just give the shot form out. Um, or I can't just go and I can give them big pills of antidote, or I have to make it look cool. So let's go and let's look at Saffris. It's like portable, like big time medication to get real fast dopamine sensation lowered. I think potentially, possibly. Because I looked at it before and it looked good to me. So basically, let's look at the potentials for this. We have trials, so let's see, 2 6-week trials on those, and then 3-week trials on them. They have trials all over the place. So I mean, it takes like trials, put it in, and then does it. So is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. I mean, I saw 2 that have like 2-week trial, or like a month and like 2-week trials. So we have that. So let's go into WebMD, the place we go, and then let's go into this aspartame chemical and let's go look it up. They say don't talk about drugs on live TV. Well, I'm doing it right now. So nobody has terminated this. So we look at the possibilities of this drug here. Looks like it has a dipole. It looks like it has hydrogen base. So it looks like it destroys some sort of decay in the dopamine schedule, right? If it decays the hydrogen, it decays the dope, right? Is that how it works? Decay the dope, decay the hydrogen, or does it decay the Livian saliva in the body like it's iodide, right? It has a disodium base. So it decays the disodium base? No? What does it do? IDK every day. So basically, it's polarized some sort of loop. And if we go back to the video, we know what loop is, and we know what a loop is, and what a loop can't be, right? So we take the diabide, and then we dilute the solution by 2, and by 2 it is, therefore a new chemical, right? As I always say. But it is chlorine in right there. So, what does the CL stand for? What's the CL stand for? Plus. Oh, not classmates. CL. Okay, we got a CL. Oh, no, CLV. Atom? Is it an atom? CL? Chlorine. Okay, so it's chlorine in it. So, yeah, CL is chlorine, so it's a neutral base. Right? I don't know. At some level, it's a neutral base. So the chlorine has 2 atoms, and it can have... Oh, chlorine has 2 atoms? So it's like in between like fluorine and like bromine, but like so like bromine is like like bread, and like fluorine is like toothpaste. No, I'm just joking. It means it's like the negative refractory of light, right? So basically, it's like if you breathe in one nostril, you get water, and you blow out the other one, you get perspirate, right? So basically, that remaining factor is hydrogen base. So it is a semicircular oxidation. So the base is lower than something like E, right? So that's water divided by a participant of the volume of products, right? So let's look at non-zebra design. We don't need this one. Oh, should we print it out? Let's do it. Because we're nice kids. We're always nice and being nice. Why not be nice one time? So take the zebra zone here. And then we save that one for the breastfeeding peoples in the earth. The hobos from the Interintelligent Agency. The ETGs, right? So basically, we look at the product of the principle here. Let's say you're switching from something like sapphires, right? No, is that not the one we're looking at? Chlorine right now. So chlorine, so we're looking at. So chloride, salt is a positive upridge, so it's positive 0.01 remaining. So it doesn't have a block. So it is right there, but it acts like these ones right here. So it's from argon to sulfur. Oh, did we already talk about argon? We talked about argon before. So it's a potential, like a remainder. This one is different because it has more bonds to it. So it moves as bonds and then purposes like a solution to a nano solution or a something else that was like poop, like the remainder of electrons. So E4, you're signify that it's 4 elements together on a chain with a hydrogen atom that is loose. Even though it has a potential bond, it is also loose. So that means it goes through 3 covalent bonds. So, like the P block would. So instead of saying P block, you say 3 remaining bonds. So instead of saying collectivized P block, you say I have a P block, a P block, like that. So instead of saying like a hallucinogenic, I have a hallucinogenic that has 0 P block, right? I'm the remainder of an oxidide. You say I have a pentameter of 0.1 on the P block. So that would be like a synthetic drug or a IP, basically. SP, kind of like the word W. And when you look in the word W in chemistry or bonds, right, it's a curse word, right? Because they don't like it. He's like, that's the bad guy of the chemistry world, right? That's the trained man. Okay, so basically you look at this. It's like, why is it oxidized? It's like plastic. And then what's sulfur like? What is sulfur like, y'all? We got one thumb up out there. Plastic, like, bargaining chip between the 0 participant of nothing, right? It's the outside world of what is nothing, right? So what is phosphate to sulfur? Anybody got that answer? It's a remainder. It's a remainder of a carbo-beta chain, right? The phosphate is like argon, right? It's a derivative. It's a phosphate chain. Like magnesium. Is this the word you're looking at? Magnesium, right there. I'm just joking. It's like above magnesium. It's a chain above magnesium. So it is the quarter of the heart rate. So you have a cyclical fuel source there. That turns into a fuel source, and then it turns into a quantity. So it is what runs your blood, so to speak. Basically, it's the remainder of the regression versus the tissue sample and your product versus the value of the overtone tissue, right? So we don't have a way to count that except counting hydrogen, like peroxide, right? Hydrogen, P, is not the same as hydrogen or peroxide. It is different because it is like a BET. They read it differently because it is confused so many times in so much of the world. So basically, we go back to the cyclical word, and then we go back into the questionable concept of the y-axis, right? Y divided by y is y, and then we go into the volt gain, right? And then we go into a particular, what were we thinking about? Like the joke about, cyclical acids, or the choice of power structures in a cell, right? So you have V0, 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 but it's replicated in that same potential. So it's a precursor. It's a remainder, like magnesium is, and that remainder is like a acidic acid, right? Like nitrogen base. There's a nitrogen base in it, and then the volume is the weight versus the sole purpose of the volume right there. So why don't we do it like that? So when someone writes something like a volume of a power unit down, they usually write it incorrect, right? So they say it's like 5 of something per quarter of, let's say 0.25. And I always get the 0.25 right, and I'd never remember the bottom part, and it says P on it. And it doesn't make sense to me. Like I say, I'm in the emergency room, I don't know what P is, and it says 0.1, and it says up to 0.91 scale, and it says S, and it says, I don't know, and then I don't know, right? The outer shell is like, these don't make sense to me. See, I see the electrons per shell. My device on the electrogram, right? And I woke up today, I was like, what is the electrogram, guys? I didn't make a show, but I was like, what is electrogram? And it's like, a power cell derivative of like something that's changed, something like technically like magnesium, something like acidic, because it's acidic product, and it has a low amount of voltage or volume. Volt gain, is that what it's called? It's an actual like a corporate word, right? It's volt gain, right? Voltage. So it's in between there. But in reality, the heart of the cell polarizes, starts, and then it creates a distribution there and effectiveness, right? Kind of like the chains of covalent bonds and ions right there. But in this purpose, they're awakened cells, so they're touchable, right? So what is this chemistry? When you go into advanced chemistry, you'll understand. It is like a nitrogen bond that is affected by the beta. But it's not a beta wave. These beta waves are very short and they're very powerful. So they have a beta attached to something, right? So basically, the beta wave works like a spindle in the oxidase environment, which is free bound, not attached to any two bonds or three bonds. So if you're the new kid in the 1 to 2 year or the 3 to 4 year, right, you have a potential there, which is like your bit system. You learn medical words. You go by the I's, right? You go and you learn the word O, and you're by the O word. You learn your zeros, right? But you have an I at the end, right? And then you have the potential of being a doctor, and you learn all your zeros, right? So basically, you go from a variable to motion, right? A volume to a motion. A volume to a motion is only distributed. So give or take, it's a outer ion to a shell. It's reflective, right? So it's like metal, basically. But the outer bonds are all potential, right? So basically, even though you have metal and it is a sound thing, it has a potential that is greater or lower than the amount that you have in your true value. Kind of like your chart of your doctor, you are in the residual of that metal, right? So I mean, like you're top of the chain, so you are signified as like, in a place between two places. So your function is like, there, but it's not there. So you delete something, it doesn't make it real, right? It makes it expanded. And this happens all the time. But the reality is, the person who's in charge is like, the potential of the value in the situation. So say you have a chart there, your chart is now against the wall. The value is now, a constant in the value of the electron chain, right? So because the chain, say you have a P chain of O, right? O, P chain, right? You have a value that's positive if it is selected as a purpose, right? So it might be bound, it might be charted, but it's bound twice, and it's charted 3 times. Let's say it's charted the 4th time, right? What's the return? So does anybody got a return for me? So we leave it empty, right? So every time, like you said, there's an empty value, like why can't one be versus the other? Because it's procedure. So you go from 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Say a person could replicate anything for 6 times, right? It doesn't mean it has to be replicated for 6 times only. It remains at 6, it keeps on going, keeps on going, keeps on going, keeps on going. In this procedure, it usually goes to infinite, right? But on the scale of like a Galmore scale, like a medical system, you would have like something like, it even out. So it wouldn't be, a significant factor in the value scale. It's built on something different. And, even this one is tricky, but I'm sure some doctors get it wrong, but that's why 8 bits are per second per, something, right? So kind of built like this CL system right there, or chlorine gas, right? Chlorine gas, it gets spilled to a farmer that replicates, right? Like Hg is to a farmer who does something that is relative to something else, IDK. So when you look at the configuration here, it has two bonds and separated here. And I skipped like a ton of information here, but we look at the block here. It says it's neon related, and you're like, it's period 3. All this looks pretty sketchy to me, but it is in the density of this thing called aqua, and then the point of soil, I guess. The remainder of a coin solution, and then a purposed volume of a process to make something else. So the volume is a solution, and the solution is a volume. So the solution is a volume of the total of a volume solution, or solution that is a volume. So explain to me how you would get to number 3. This is a good example for any doctor to know, to a spindle, right? Or, okay, something simpler, right? Don't explain me a simplest thing, right? So how would you get from the number 3 to the charter that is, let's say like it's like a playlist, right? A playlist soundtrack, right? So you would go from number 3, and this is a very simple one, it's very clueful. So you have the remainder, which is the inner and outer, and then you have the value, which is connected to a measurement of the remainder, right? So you have a 0.90, for example, and then you have the remainder, and then this is where we're going into, deca or decagram, right? Like deca is like the color of a shirt in like Greek, right? But the reality is, you learn that the reality is you don't have a reactive negative force, or a negative force that is a whole different world, right? So, the reactive force is the potential, right, of 2 values, right? So the potential is the value of this steam right here. So we have the 0L system right there, like, or what you might consider like an easy way to write it. It's a hypothesis that all the remainders are equal up to all of the digits, right? So in the words of the wise, it's like you're sitting in the blue in the situation. You might be in a positive reaction of like gang violence in a hospital situation, or you might not be. You might be counting the volume sticks on your volume controller and your volume, mind, right? Or you might think like, my name's volume, and I might like, come up with a new solution. Or I might be in the clouds and I might be God, right? And I might have ribs I want to come down and give you, right? So the reality of that situation is you have a particular, setting. You can differentiate every volume or set number, but the differentiation is, typically returned as something that is a solution. So you're basically drawing a significant curve, line from something to something, and you're creating a solution that is kind of like a diatribe of the solution. Kind of like if you're like echoing the world and going, like, what is the language of the earth, right? It goes, dut, dut, it goes, and then in principle, it's all based on nothing. The idea is that it is based on nothing, right? The potential is greater than the volume itself, and you're like, gosh, that's a lot easier than remembering anything, right? How am I going to remember that? And they're like, as a kid, did you prepare these as a statement? And I sure did. The right thing and the wrong thing in that situation is to blame someone, right? Right. I mean, there's accidents that happen. So it's basically based on the idea of decay. Again, like, what's your business you're going to start when you get the money? This is your Decay Labs Collective. That's mine. Okay, so basically you take the resurrected image, like the alarm concept. Take your inner range of that child's arm, and like it's floppy in the Aspergine syndrome. You're like, it's my arm, it's floppy, right? I can only count maybe, or I hurt my hand and I'm an adult and I fractured it, and I only can lift my middle finger or split my middle finger because it's broken or something, right? Okay, maybe you're in the military, you're triggering with a gun and you start shooting with your middle finger or some shit. Or you're a typist and you bring your middle finger and you tap it once and then you tap it twice. Or you have the potential to do whatever you want, right? Or you're grabbing the coat hanger at the last second, you grab it, right? Or whatever. But the potential is, your values are, symmetrical, always. They're like, always symmetrical. So basically the property is to overlap them always, and put them together, show them to do something with them, right? Or, to take the 4 digibats and then, make a volume out of them. Because they're the potential of what your volume is. But when you're like young, you might learn like, the part of your body is like the inch, right? Or, the part of the body is like the potential of your inch, right? So scored in a certain way. It's like, computing one versus the other. It's like the other side of the universe, if there's no universe. So that's why they select one to be a purpose and the other not to be a purpose, right? But it's also a contrast, so you take into that environment, but the cells regress. That's why the elements are in like maybe a section here, and then why the other ones are not, because they can change into different things. Like chlorine is a gas, so gas exposed to some material. Well, it's a cleaning agent when exposed to some other environment, right? Or agent, environment, right? So the potential there is kind of like a tide, right? So you take the potential, like something like spindle in the air has 6 constants there, and then it's like take the fraction of the Earth score or something like that, and then you have a value of like distribution of variation, points. And did I make the variation? Did I make the atomic elements? No, I certainly did not. Or did I? Okay, so the potentials are there that are a reality there. So you have the contribute in the sky, you have the elements in the life of you, and you're like, why did I hire this guy? Right? And we got 1 thumbs up here, and you're like, why didn't I hire this guy? Right? like you've like come home from school, and you're like, I've smoked a pack of cigarettes today. I've joined the Mile High diet, and you're like, why did I do this? Right? Like, so the potential is there. Like, why did I lay down like everything on Earth? Like, nobody really knows an answer to this, right? How do you measure decay? You can't. It's a bunch of numbers that a bunch of people got together and created, basically, right? It's a bunch of numbers because that's the way it works. Like project management, it's the same way, man. The potential of earned value is the potential of all the value, right? And no one's joking. It's if you can computate what you can say, that's all you have to say at all. So you take the motions of your exaggeration, right? And you always make the mistake, right? You make the scratch where you make the motions and you make the value, right? So nobody wants to say the value has no solution or the solution has no value. Like kind of saying like, if I have a value, do I have a solution? And you're like, I sure don't have a solution if I have no value, but I have a value if I have no solution, right? So the opposite occurs. So like take the refractory code of something like ROT13. The potential is based on 23 static gamma, whatever script, right? It doesn't really have a meaning anymore, right? It's based on like common goods, common units, which are distributed per unit. They're utils. In economics, you'll learn the word business utils as a way to say satisfaction. So if I have a satisfaction, I just do +1, and then I divide all the utils for all the people, and that's how much I have made in utils or something like that per person, right? Very, very simple, and that's as simple as it. You put the business world is as simple as you can put it, right? Utils are a notion of whatever is not simple, right? So in framework of English, it works the same way as any language for any framework. So when the potential of something like the slowest of time, we don't really recognize time as a precursor of anything. You have a value that is a differential of a safe kept value that is distributed over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? But the potential is to stop that order. So you put an individual mark there and you have a remainder, right? So the remainder of an invisible number is repeated over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So the potential is the greatest amount. That's how you spell the environment. For someone who believes in any idea, it comes from the Greek idea of the potential is the great amount of the stratosphere divided by the potential of, let's say, a value of a number greater than the significance of no focus, right? No focus is no focus. So why is it no focus have not really much to it? So take the no focus concept, right? You have a no focus concept that is reversible in any language. It has no potential except all the potential, right? So you take the potential by the no focus word or concept, it wasn't really like the no focus. There was a focus right to it. There was a focus, but the potential is now no focus. 0 for 0, right? The potential there is like a focus that is a focus of something that happened, right? So it's what we call in the world AD, or something like BCE, right? These potentials are focuses through time, right? Time, focus, time. The potential is the value of the setting of the focus, right? So if there's 1, there is a positive reaction of a 0, right? If there's a focus of 1, it equals 1. Right? If the potential of 1 and 2 equal 2, then the potential of 2 and 0 equal 1, right? So that means the potential of a fraction could be any part per amount, parts per amount. So if you have in this case a product, and then let's say a amount, we write the word I. Right? Oh, I'm sorry, I wrote it wrong. Because I have sloppy cursive, right? So we have the amount I, which is separated by everything, right? Anything in it. So it's I, right? The dependent factor is a result. So the dependent factor is a result because it's based on what? So it's based on the principle of the volume of that solution, right? Like everyone has a volume of a solution. There is therefore a volume of a solution that is central to identity, right? So the identity is like the precursor of the value of 9 doubled, right? So you have 2 something, and then you have a value that is greater than value greater than the sum. So in that order, it would be the bias is greater than the sum. So in that interest, you are greater, 6 is greater than the potential of 1, right? And then the potential of 0 is greater than the potential of I, right? So, or is the potential greater than, less than I? So it's the potential is less than I, right? But it's not the potential is less than I is less than the potential of significance. So we have no significance in that figure. So that means I is equals the proportion of a value. So value equals the distribution of 2. So that means that the basic value we would select to protect is the number 2 in this proof, what we consider a proof, as a distribution or a way to deviate 2 central things or 2 identities, right? So that's to create a solution for all of the numbers here, right? Even though there's 2 samples and one might be negative in reverse or something, right? The potential is, to take 2 of one sum, right? But the potential is to count all of one sum, or return, create, or no, not create, it's to focus, or, select, or try, right? It would be to use all of one sum. So you have a direction, and a computation machine would say, what is this chord here? It might say E, or it might say equal to, or let's say it says command, or let's say that's the option. It says not equal to E, or it says it's not equal to something like, the potential of 1, right? what's the answer then, right? The potential is, you have, a sum, right? But then what's your potential of having an average, um, versus, 1? So you have, potential of order. You have the order of potential. Are those reactory? I mean, you wouldn't go say they're symmetrical because it doesn't represent any sum. It's just repetitive. So it just means it's repetitive in that way, right? So the sum is the solution of sums. And you could say that 1 is a progression of 2. Because the value is computed. So the value of basically saying number 2, like if it was written like that in English, or it was what they consider word salad, right? The potential is what? It would be the unknown principle, or it would be the known principle in this case, right? Would it be the fixed principle, or would it be the solution of the principle? Ugh. So if you have all the solutions and all the systematic solutions there, the solution is next to the sum, where the sum is explained, or is it distributed, or is it the solution of a value of the average of a solution? So if the average of the solution has 5 or 6 digits, right, so it's computed and compressed, right? Unlike binary, right? The solution is averaged as a block, right? The block is resting as one solution, and it has a difference, right? So when you go back to the chlorine thing, right, the order is of sums. The potential is like, something like a reactive potential in morphine. The potential is also like that of metal composite, or like, fabric, right? But the reality is the potential is also the volume of a solution. So when you have all those solutions and you have 0 quota, right? So the quota has no answer to it. It's just a solution. It's a question, like, why? Why do you have a solution if you can't have any questions, right? It's quid pro quo, but the solution is represented by an undefined I, right? So instead of saying this I, right, in reality, you would have a solution based in I. So you would have a solution that might be greater than, but what illustration would you have if it was positive? Let's say positive or negative. Oh, or negative, right? So, or negative. Big negative, or what else would it be? It would positive, or it was a question? Right? I don't know. So the question there is you have to ask yourself, right? You have to say, like, why do I have a solution that I have no solution in if I can even explain the solution, which is a solution versus no solution? How do I have a solution that doesn't exist? How do I have a statement in that example that doesn't exist? How do I have a value that is unestimated? Quid pro quo. Why is quid pro quo in opposition? Why is the remainder value I can't even understand? Why is the value asymptotal? So if you have a value that's asymptotal, you have a nomenclature, right? But it's not that simple, right? You have a value that is a distribution of something that is directed. So these words don't go together because they sound like each other. So when they have a one coordinate on a plane, you have one asymptotal, which is one volume of an order of something that is a solution. If you have one value that is not a solution, what is it? Take a script from one computer that has a set of arrays. How many arrays do you have? You have one array, one positive array, and then two arrays. The volume there is greater than input. So the solution to that is on the y-axis is, anybody? Is like a solution to the volume versus the solution of the value. You have one value and then one solution. Per value. That's 1 distributed to 0. So why do we have a mistake? We can't keep on making a mistake if there's no volume, there's no purpose. And if you're going with me here, the value of a solution is a distribution. You know what? The solution of a value is a distribution that is a value. Right? So you can take from that, the value has, voting power, has a distribution, it has an idea behind the distribution of a value, but it also has a partake into a value. It's a simple solution, or a solution that is, anybody? A solution that is a value, right? So that value is a solution if it is an array, it is asymptotal causality. Why is that? Because the power 1 doesn't go to 1, or the power in 1 unit doesn't go to 1 power unit. 1 unit of E maybe doesn't equal to 1E. That power is like motion. Motion doesn't move. Motion doesn't scratch. Motion is motion. Potential of motion is a value that does not stop. So that means you cannot count motion. The potential is only to find motion. And that's the simplest answer to that outer greater sulfur shell, right? Or the sulfuric shell, right? So the potential is the order versus the solution versus the value versus the order versus the solution, right? So you're stuck into that middle range of that value and solution. The value is a solution, just like that xenon gas right there, right? Or what's the gas here? The vapor pressure from the noble gas property. No, it's the something, right? So the value there is like argon and sulfur. Is that it? Argon? I don't know. So the solution is just like that. Xenon, right? Xenon gas, right? Abridged xenon gas, or is it periodical, period 3? No. Halogens? No. It's the gas that's like it? No, it's the fluorine. Is it the fluorine gas? I don't know. We were looking over it earlier, right? So is the sulfur-like gas, because we make it with sulfur, right? So the potential there is a value that is basically microscopic, right? Kind of like the electrons in the gold foil experiment, right? Different values in the experiment that you can follow in order. They're like socially fashioned, like how they make the cork to begin with, how they made the cork, how they distributed the pattern to create the cork, and everything about it. So the potential is the value versus the significance in the value, which all go back to this suction. Just like the way something can get taken into a story or something like that, right? The AD story. And then, or something like C, the potential of the value of a story. Something that's a distribution. So the distribution is an order of value, of remainder, of time, of motion as well, correct, of, we have value already, so is there more value, or is there little value, or no value? Do we not take value into account, right? What about no value? Of some value, of more value, of same value. So there's an agreement within this distribution. A lot of people overlook this. It's a potential of a value that's not forced, but it's laid, and it's given as an example, through the books or writing, or value of distribution. It's not effective writing. It's more of the material behind value material that is the potential of the value itself, right? Kind of like the beta wave. It's like the wave itself is a functioning value we can grow, we can learn to accept, and find deviations from, and we can look into the deviations between those effective ways, those thoughts that support those ways of finding or finding a resolution between maybe two plus resolutions, right? So those values are combined, connected at all times, right? So if there's one value, you have 0 values. How do you get 1? So basically, you get the value by something like an asymptotal square. So like 1 to 2 to 1. So the value is repetitive. The value is sorted. And the value is a solution. So the potential is one thing can equal out to something else. One beta wave, for example, can equal out to a sum of beta waves. One potential, like in something like an iodine or disodium, can be returned as a, well, it can be returned as function of a date, right? Date, time, value, right? Not of success, not of potential, not of direction, not of order, not random. So there's the potential. The potential. So those are all potentials. In this util scale, you have the random digits and value digits. The value digits and complete digits, which are y-axis bound. So those are potentials that are left into greater sums. Greater sums. So the potential there, social order, facts, memorized thoughts, cost derivatives. Function goes on, right? Basically, Thoughts about compromise. Thoughts about return goods. Compromises about value. And then how would you count a compromise of value if you didn't have a solution, which is like the value of theft, of stealing or making theft. So the social order in that value is like something like a pair of threes. Say you have three notions, which is, I can't make anything happen with only water, right? Water does not equal life. The volume there is 0 distributed to, let's say, it's based on the number system here, right? It's based on 2, 2, and then the other 2 right there. So the distribution there of the number is distributed evenly to, like, say something like a radio wave, right? Radio wave frequency, right? So take the value there, the pair of threes and the value of 3, right? It's distributed over and over and over again, like an entourage, right? Like the sky. Can you rule and vote on the sky? Can you make something happen that is not the sky if there is no water? Obviously, you can't take 0 from nothing in logic. No, not possible. So basically, we can prove that by dividing 0 by 1. Can you take 0 from 1? No, we can't. Can you take 1 from 0? No, you can't. So, but is there a reason or recognition between it? It isn't. It isn't something there is, as I put it. So the solution is a value of a sum of a choice of orders. That is a sum of a choice of orders. Why is it so significant? It is a significant figure. And I've been taught this multiple times. The value stays the same, and the value is always the same, right? No matter what computer you ask and what value it says, right? The value is split between 2 pairs. Pairs like that of an electron and RAM. The same is for oxygen. It splits, however, it always remains. Why? Because in theory, there's nothing that will ever accomplish that fact. Nothing can compute nothing. In philosophy, the exchange there, the rate of value, is a sum. A sum is a derivative of a constant. So value is a value of significance. So the value is equal to 1. The social order there is, well, isn't that work? How does that work? If everything is equal to 1, then isn't everything equal to 1? Yes, because everything can equal to 1 at all times. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. Yep. All of that happens, but the social order of value. The value is equal to 2. Value is equal equal to 2. So the value is equal to 2 in social order. The value is equal to 3, something else, right? If the value is equal to a value that is distributed, constant, right? Constant is a value that is distributed in 2 pairs, right? Or 2 things, right? Or 2 social orders that is a value represented in 1. The value of 2 things, 2 pairs, 2 identities is equal to so the social order is valued at, something that is diametrical. So that means it overlaps. The value is greater than the potential. The value is a unit. Why? Because if it was greater, it would have a sum. Sum is a balance. Value is a constant. So the value is greater than 2. That means the value is not compute. Right. So the value there is a regression. The value is lower than 2. The potential greater than all. Value is a function, therefore. Potential is a direction. Why? Because if A, 0, 2, B, 1. So the potential is no is nothing, or 0 is nothing, right? And 1 is something. Nothing is nothing. You can tell also the potential has weight. The unit has weight. It is slow. How about the potential is also large. If it is slow, therefore it's large, right? Because its value is slow. the value is slow, right? So it's kind of like a box in a box, right? The value is, a bag in a bag, right? The value is a distribution effectiveness. If there's no value, if something doesn't fit in, then it's not really fitting it. It doesn't value anything. It's like a magnetization pole with something that can't be. It doesn't even make sense. It just kind of like use. It's a concept that is abnormal. The potential there is an adjustment towards, solution or sanitary, right? Sanitation is the biggest principal concern there. So the value has a distribution that is a solution that might be lower, possibly. The solution has to be lower, right? The solution has to be lower than a greater amount or some sort of great amount, like some bigger amount. So let's say 100, numbers times something, right? It's gibberish, right? I mean, this gibberish, if you were to count it, like you count on a computer, I don't, right? A computer count on a computer, I don't believe it does, right? I could see it. Does this whole thing do that? I don't think it does, right? The potential, though, therefore, is easy because all of the potential is there. So potential is viewable. So that means the answer is a quotient. Let's see how we can spell quotient. Right. Quote. Okay, I spelled it incorrect, but answer is a quotient. So therefore, it has a answer. As a result as well, result because it is linear. You can find that's tangible and positive as well, because it has a reaction. So it is positive and it is tangible. So the value is slower than the value of its return. Okay, so there's the value of one, or quantity of one. The value is basically something you can quantify. The value is beta, kind of like a beta, right? It's like a thing that kind of fits in like a beta wave, right? I mean, it's like a little bit like a beta wave, right? So the function can compute, it just doesn't compute, it's too slow. And the reality is, the value of 2 parts of a solution. So the value has to be quantifiable in a way, right? So the magnificent thing there is the value that can't quantify, that has a social order, that has a value versus or a fact or virtue of a fact, right? The value is entropy itself, right? So common, it doesn't even have a choice of an answer, it's just an answer itself. So is the foundation of this value a distribution of an error, or the distribution of a value that is a function of thought, right? So when you look at a quotient, right, the foundation is a quotient that is built from, the idea that the potential is greater than the theorem, right? The theorem is greater than the solution, but it's actually the solution because the theorem came from the solution. So the solution is a positive exchange of one util, or until one util, but it is equal to one util, basically. That one util is an optional, imagination or theorem. It's kind of like the hypothesis theorem, the one about triangulating a triangle, right? It's probably one of the most important theorems in the solution, right? Solution is a value of odd numbers. Is a solution is a plane built out of the idea of time. A value is therefore greater. So the value is lower than the value of 2 parts, less than 2. Oh, looks like my computer broke. So the value is like a Unix is to like a trial or a return value because it is in 2 separate containers, right? So the value is greater than the sum, the value is lower than the sum, so therefore it is no compute, right? For this system. For this system, there's 2 parts of every choice. This is quantifiable, has social order, and then can progress towards social order. So the progression is a social order versus a solution that is a constant. As a value, the constant is greater than 2. A value less a constant is lower than 2. Potential is a returns mechanic. So a value is a differential, just like in this computer. Value, but isn't a differential because it says it's a differential. It's a differential because it says it is a constant. So there's a reaction between 2 limits in the computer and a measurement. Because it is quantifiable, so therefore it's a measurement, it's a value. Value is direct. And it has an input because it has a value that's quantifiable in a space. So space is a vacuum. A vacuum is a potential of order. So an order is a potential of 2 vacuums per, one solution. What solution is a potential of, a quantifiable value if it is similar in structure to something like blank space. So we can't compute water because the water will distribute all the value in the computer differently. The value of a computer is 2 distributions that are unique, right? So there's the water, and then there's the outside, or there's material that's decaying on the outside, but the inside, the container, right? There's the value of the inside and outside, right? But it's a container, right? So the value is a distribution, again, of a value that's lower than the quantity of the amount. So the greater choice is, in that situation or solution, we're not talking about the universe, we're talking about an undefined term itself, right? So what we think is an undefined term, the pool, population, and then the value, even though the value and the population are both negative or remain in a negative space, right? Because the potential has to be a value that is a solution, that is selective and positive, right? So the positive solution in that situation is a value that is direct, or it's in order to a solution as a value to a direct solution. So the value has 3 parts in a way, right? The solution also has 2 parts in a way. The solution is a value that is also a value that is a distribution, right? So the value of my mouse cursor was going on. The value is also a distribution of something that is a deviation. That system, right? The system is a deviation followed by a value. So in computing, I mean, nobody's forbidden from putting one thing versus another. Let me write that down. No computer can tell a user that it may not create, right? So in that potential, that means there is a viable way to create something, right? So something comes from something, and something doesn't come from something. So that value is a value that is a solution that is quantifiable by some sort of solution that is a value of a computation, right? That value is a computation, just like a computation is a value of social order, or social order is a value of computation, right? Computation is a value of social order, a value of constant, a value of order, solution, keep on going on, the list goes on and on and on. But the value is still asymptotic towards that digitization, like something like the advent, or the calendar, right? So there's a C, or BC, right? And then there's the value and the constant, right? So there's AD. The value is constant versus the volume, which is the value of the constant, which is a value, right? So like, how does it equal to another figure if it is a calendar? So, you take back to these examples of being in zero, right? The midst of zero, the solution of zero and the value of zero, right? So zero, it does nothing, right? So no one did anything ever, So basically the value is a function that is a value, and it's very, very simple. It's probably the easiest method. So it's like saying 1 equals 2 equals 3 equals a process that is more than, right? Almost, right? It says like it counts. It doesn't count, but the solution is slower. It's not written right. So the solution is a value that is digital, right? It could be anything distorted into sums of like 3 parts. It's like almost like 3 commandments in a way, but it's not, right? Solutions that are written differently. So solutions are like solutions through, a microscopic or macroscopic concept, right? You have your self-image, right? And then you have, what you can see under the definition. So you might say fuel, be in, as in fuel. Let's write that, be in, fuel, or I'm sorry, let's spell it right, fuel, right? And then we'll look at, a value of something that's like, the value of, what's the other one? Your actual presence, right? So let's put, your potential is 90, because you have your DNA, and then you have your potential, which is polarized. It's the concepts we have, and then we have the potential of, let's say +1. Let's say the reaction of, positive choice, right? We'll put C as the utils in that matter, right? C is the utils. So we have a potential which is bin, and then the potential of spinning going, right? And then the order of, a unit of 1, right? So 1 unit, you don't need to write it, you just have the 1 unit. It's before the variables came about. You have the potential, you have the value, and then you have the soundness, the sameness, or the potential of the coin, right? So it's the movement, it's the right, the angle, the choice. So the value there is the value directly directed, right? So it's the direction of the value versus, the movement, the cursor, the pre-choice, the value, the concern even, right? The solution of a value, and then the return of the value, which is the solution, right? It's connected to everything. It's like almost like adenosine is in the body, right? Adenosine is a revertive property chemical. It reverts things to tensive ease, the chemical properties, right? The potential is, the outer predominator, the value like water, and the value of like oxygen, hydrogen, right? But not a simple cell, protein, right? Interface, right? It's different, right? It's different because it has a potential, has a value, as a social order. But the order here is different from like the letters in language, like they had back in the day. The value, or just numbers for that matter, right? The potential is like a non-compute, right? So the compute is like a value that is a sum, like a digit that is not quantifiable. In programming, you might consider this wet concept, right? It's wet. Well, there's dry, dry. So the potential there is potential, right. So the potential in logic is the same principle there, right? So you have a target it doesn't even make sense. You have the potential of a social order, even though it doesn't make sense, it's quantifiable on one side, and the other side is the same, even though the potential is similar. Even if their spaces are quantifiable, active, like ideas, right? The particles, right? So the potential is a concept of like a social order and a social value at the same time, right? The social value, social concept, the social order, social value, social concept, and social order, little introspheric concepts, right? In like sociology, you might call it one thing, right? You might call it an SGM of like, space or living concern, emotion, self-esteem, social order, community awareness, reality, the progress of life, all these little normal things, right? Normal things, right? But they should be normal things to everybody, right? So there's somebody in the mix of, or a mix of something that doesn't make sense in social order. It's a value that's unknown, it's undirected, and it's a social order of a value that doesn't exist, right? So to speak, right? So, if all of that is quantifiable and all of that is connected, so the dot says, those are the things asking the question, right? The regulation of like the idea of haptos angle, right, is that it's different. Like it doesn't connect. It's not the train tracks that can just connect, and just connect, right? So there's some sort of problem. Right, so there's some sort of language problem as well. We have a framework issue right there. Not all the variables are there. The language isn't there, right? Sort of it mix each other. It kind of mixes and kind of is the framework there. So the potential is the value of the social order, right? And that's the quantifiable. We are humans. We all drink water. We all depend on things, right? If there's a social order, we depend on it, right? If we depend on humans, we depend on that. If we depend on other humans besides the one human we're with, right? Even if it's ourselves, we have the self-image there. We have the self-proclamation of we are one, right? one person. Right? So the potential there is a potential. Oh, I spelled it wrong. And the zero is a potential itself. Right? So field source is a field source, but the potential of the deviation of the field source is a remainder or residual of that effectiveness. Right? It's like a language unspoken, right? Because they also have this issue. There's a value to potentials, right? The potential is, a value of, a sum, and that value is a potential of a social order. That's correct. Social order of a potential. That social order is a potential of a value that is directly related to the centrifugal, force or something like that. So the potential there is like a remainder versus a balance versus a remainder versus a balance, right? The balance is like a balance sheet. It's almost like you're expected to know this stuff, right? So when you don't have rest, or the idea of like digitalism in the computing world, which is it's separated or not separated, it's always together, but it's always separated, right? The potential there is the value that is less than the value of the potential, right? So the value is the potential versus a potential. And I know it gets complicated, so you might use a number, you might use a setting for this like middle ground, this idea of the potential versus value, right? Potential versus value. Well, there's potential versus cost. The potential there is maybe whatever, it's greater. It goes, you hurt me if I hurt you, kind of thing. I'm just joking. I don't know that story at all. So the potential is, a bunch of stuff. It's like the middle ground of the potential, right? So the potential is, the reality of life and stuff. So if the potential is the reality of the potential, is there a value of the potential? Well, I think so. There's always a potential of a value if there's a value of a potential, right? If there's one value There's one potential. If there's one value, there's one potential. There's law and order. Law and order. You like that stuff? You like that stuff? Like, if you have one potential, can you have two potentials? Yeah, you can have one potential. You can have two potentials. Because all the utils want to belong to someone and they want to be included or happy. So the potential is the value, and the value is the potential of the value, right? So the potential is a value if it is contained. But the potential is a value. That could be a mistake. So that means the potential is also a value that's given life. So the potential is also a value that is given self. So the potential is also a problem. But the value is also a direction. Of support. According to a sum that was created to the other calendar. But the value to this calendar is a solution that is positive. And the value is the sum of that value. So the sum of that value is not highly religious. It's a driving thought, right? So it's the potential of the value of a constant. So what does that mean? It means it is the potential of the value that is quantifiable. Why? Because you can't hold the chain. That's right. So if basically by this principle, right, you're saying all things are quantifiable by the potential of the realm. The realm in that sociological order is like kind of the muster of the thought, law, order, the potential of like witchcraft is the same way, right? Everything fits into this dynamic of social order. It's sociologically sound. So if you're looking at the idea of criminology, this is the key concept you have to know and remember. So the potential of all order is social order, and all social order is the value of all potential. So it's kind of like the ego, the ID, the superego. This manifested language of what someone would consider maybe philosophy, right, or the subject generalization of like potential, right? So you have a construct, you have a reality, and then you have the given amplitude of a constant foresight into reality, right? It doesn't make you question it all. It doesn't make you have the answer at all times. It makes you, reliable, right? The question is not the answer, but the answer is the answer, right? So the answer is a quote. So it's a return. The return concept is basically the potential, which is, it has an answer. So basically the potential there, right, is like the potential of something like, the reverberated cells in your body. Say, like, instantly we're going back to the thought and theme of aspartate, right, or aspirate plant, right? So the potential there is not like or unlike plastic, right? The potential is just like plastic, right? Because it's just a mineral or composite, or it's just like the incredible elements we're talking about, or the potential elements that are arranged in a certain, way that become or are potentials of value that are low sums, even sums, direct answers, potentials that are values that are answers, right? They're quotes. They're potential, they're solutions, right? Their values, their solutions, even though it's potential to constant, right? It's a, what was the word we're looking for here? The potential of the constant. It's like, gosh, we'd have to return the question, what is the potential of a constant, right? What is the potential of a value if you can't have any potential of any value if there's no constant, right? Right. So it's a good question, right? It's quantifiable, basically. So this is the word we're looking for, quantifiable. The potential is quantifiable because it is the direct proportion now. So now we're connecting the dots, like, those tiny loops, nothing's quantifiable sometimes, and something is quantifiable, right? What is the idea between quantifiable grounds and the non-quantifiable grounds? Is that the next direct, question of quantifiable grounds? Is there a sum of a matrix that is incomplete? So we're going from the potential, right? Like in like computer jargon, you would say the potential, and they're like, hey, that's right. Like forensically, the potential of the computer says, there is, so there is, and there isn't, and there isn't, and then there is, and there isn't, and there is, and there isn't, and going on, right? There's no potential in that value, right? That order is the same. That order is the same at all times. I can't get everything I do videotaped the whole time, right? But that potential is also, if you look at the small print there, it's double the amount, right? It's double the amount because the potential is yearned, right? So I don't really write functions on this channel very much, right? But this is a potential. Trust me. So the potential of a value that's a function, say of a derivative that's like, the differential of a function that's a derivative because it is greater, but divided by the potential that is a value, right? Is the same value of a potential is greater than the potential of the value, right? So if that equals that, then that equals this, right? So if the potential of the value is the social order, then that means you can round the equation of the value that is the equation sum of the entire world and environment versus the value, like kind of like saying no on a low scale of saying zero but no. So basically the conversation goes, you could amount to anything if you could be amount to anything. If you have no potential, you have no social order, and if you have no social order, you have no value, and if you have no value, you have no value at all, right? But you have social order and you have value. It's kind of like, what do you call your information? You might consider it your solution, or you might consider it your value of a solution, which is a value and a solution. So as I say, like no economy goes unreturned, right? Or no economy is not returned, right? So what about a solution that isn't even existing in the space we have? We've counted everything. We have no solution. We have no value. We have no solution and value. You have the entertainment thought of a definition and a direct value. You can make it one more solution easier. by pinpointing, by searching these numbers online. So there's a potential and there's a value, right? There's a value and a potential. And the value has a direct image to it, like what you can see, what you can hear, what you can think, what you can feel, right? The potential might be bad, it might be good, right? The potential is the value of the social order, but the value of sums is different than the value of the sums you can have. Like a specific technology, right? Or like, the idea of a return upon a return, right? The return of the return is the value that is scoptic, right? Scoptic is a value of a potential, which is return, and a value of something that is defined. So that potential is a value that is returned in a value that is a potential. Right? That was Donald Trump. How crazy is that? So the potential there is the value of the potential, and it goes on into a strong signal of what's a potential, what's a value, what's a value, and what's a potential, right? So the potential of a value is a good question, right? So take again the idea of plastics and the range of what you can arrange from the limited value of the plastic. I mean, it's kind of poisonous. It melts. The only reason it's solid is because it has a solution around it, right? But the solution isn't a value of two solutions, right? It's a solution, so it's an item, it's a util. And you go and progress into utils, you learn that utils are a thing, utils, right? Okay, so the potential is like water, a water solution that's purified, right? But it's like a disodium, but it isn't a disodium because it ends, right? It is a subtractive force. Has things you can use with it. It's a util itself. It's a potential. It's open. So it's open, right? Basically, is that what it means? It's open. So the potential is open versus the regular, or what you consider a specific thought. So you have an order versus a value. So in this function, there's a functioning value here. You have a returning thought of how many multiplication times, or how many sums of the balance you can create, and how many sums of the balance you can create versus the value of the social order, or in this case the value of order versus the perplex of the value versus the sum of the value versus the sum of the value versus the perplex of someone or something like the value of a sum of order, right? So you have a summed order, you have a value of a specific need for that order and value, and then you have the need for the value and social, or a specific need for that order and value, right? Kind of like the idea about specifically creating like select pools within select pools, and then creating a solution of a select pool that doesn't exist. In the sampling world, we don't use that. Using a sampling world within the distribution, you have no selection, right? But you have a purpose, and that selection keeps on coming up. It's a precursor. It's a value. The valued sum is a solution. It creates a solution within our programming example, right? So a solution is like an undefined solution versus that value that is an undefined solution, which is a solution versus a solution in its order, right? It's like can you teach your computer to read Latin? I don't think you can teach your computer to read Latin. I'm specifically sure you can't teach your computer to read Latin or write Latin. But specifically, I do know that the specifics of the value, like your earned potential and rate, and then the potential rate and your own interest, right? Or the repeated thing is again the same concept. Sophisticated value versus return value versus the constant of the value versus the return value versus the constant versus the value of the constant and the value of the constant after that. So does that go for everything in the potential world? It does, and I looked into this multiple times yesterday, right? So the value is forever, right? The value is forever, and the value is the potential of the value. So that's the potential of that value. The order is completely different. So you can apply this to multiple things, right? So you can apply it to, let's say, the sample within the population, right? Yeah, you could write it into the sample of the population, and it would be, an even number. So it would be, distributed as an even number, and the distribution would be even enough to have a solution that is a differential versus a value that is a differential. So therefore, it's a value, or therefore it's a solution, and because it is a sum, and the value is estimated to be, like 0, right? So it's the estimation is to be like 0, but the value is indeed not 0 because it's a value that is a value of a distribution like the number 2, right? So take the number 2, the value of 1, and then you have a circular solution. So the solution is one connects to the other. It doesn't connect to the other because it's out of order, right? It's the concept of the value of the order. Right? The order is a value of the concept of a solution versus a solution that is a concept, right? So the concept is a value versus a social order. And the social order is a value of the solution of a constant, which is a social order. That is a value, right? So the value is a social order. Then what's the value without a social order? That's a constant, right? So when you look at the big math, you have a function like let, right? Let is a value of a social function, right? It's bad. In social world called criminal justice, we call it the most problematic thing in the world, right? So in the solution of a matter, right, extensive questions lasting, right, it's problematic. So it's a solution to it, right? In a non-solutive world, you have a solution that is directive, so it has a means for a solution that is, grammatical. Like it has a solution as a container, as a parameter, as a reason, as a value that is a solution. That is an extreme, but it's a solution that's a social order and value, kind of like the social order of a value that's a solution. So like when you scream to yourself, time, it's time to do this, right? It's a social order of a resolution versus kind of like a return. You're like, I got a return here, or I got a value, I got a solution, I got a value, I got a solution versus a value. I got a solution that's a value, and I got a return value that's a solution. Like, how'd you get so smart, right? But you got a value also. There's also a solution. So you don't say like I win, or I have a social order, I have a value. I have a plan, or a plan, right? Then I have a value, which is either this or that, right? And then I have a value that's a solution. So I have a solution that's a value versus a solution that's a value. Right? The solution is a value that's a solution versus a value versus a solution is a value, right? Like time. So you go like, I have checked the time today. I have the value of whatever time it is. I have checked the time. It's a value of that. I've checked the time, and it's a value of that. And I have checked the time. I have a value of that. So the solution is an order in time, this time format. It's a solution of a value versus, time, order, value, schedule versus a time, schedule, value, time, schedule, value versus a schedule versus a time versus, something is a value, a time versus a value, a social order. So why is there, ever-ending, functions and questions and markers, right? Because there's values, there's times, there's values and times, there's values and times, there's values and times. And the social order, which is like, the specifics of the value of the social order of the value of the social order and the value in the social order. So it's a distributed mass right there, right? Like kind of a distributed mass. The solution is an order. This is interscopic, right? As a macro property, as a micro property, as a differential, and has a value of about, 2 things, right? So the social order is a thing, but it's not a thing. It's a volume, it's not a thing. It's a value, that's a thing, and the value is symmetric. So basically, it's maybe been tampered with, it's been, used, it's been functional, it's deranged, it's arranged, basically. If you can't understand the word distress, then just leave the meeting. You have one thumb up, and that's it. So the solution is an order and order is a solution. So, in today.